And I want to welcome everybody to this regular session on Wednesday, February the 16th. And we will begin this evening by our roll call. If the clerk would please call the roll.
Okay, Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Here.
Sims.
Here.
Volan. Scambaluri.
Here.
Sandberg.
Here.
Rollo.
Here.
Flaherty.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
And Piedmont Smith. And I believe that Councilmember Piedmont Smith is in the room, but maybe not be able to unmute herself yet.
Okay.
And Councilmember
Do we
Volan.
know? Yes.
I'm here, by the way.
Excuse me.
I just got unmuted.
Thank you.
Do we want to wait a minute until we can get Councilmember Piedmont Smith unmuted? Apparently she'll be with us. Yeah, there she is. Okay, and to summarize the agenda today, we will not have any minutes to approve this evening, but that is followed by reports from council members, reports from the mayor and city offices, and then council committee reports, which we do have one from the Council Transportation Committee. Then we'll have our first opportunity for public comment, followed by appointments to boards and commissions, and we will certainly have a few this evening. And that is followed by legislation for second readings and resolutions, which is Resolution 22-05 to designate an economic revitalization area, approve the statement of benefits, and authorize an abatement period for real property improvements and personal property, properties at 1300 South Patterson Drive, Catalent, Indiana, LLC is the petitioner. Followed by legislation for first readings, and there will be none. We will have a second opportunity for public comment toward the end of our meeting, followed by discussion on our council schedule, and then we will adjourn for the evening. So let us begin this evening with reports from council members, and I will begin on my screen with how I see you, and let us begin this evening with Councilmember Piedmont Smith, who is juggling her cat.
Thank you, President Sandberg. I have no report tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Volan.
Recording in
report.
progress.
No report, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rosenbarger.
No report, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, just to mention that my third Monday of the month constituent meeting will be Monday the 21st next week at 5:30 p.m. The details for that, which is being conducted via Zoom, can be found on the council's webpage, bloomington.in.gov/council. There's a calendar link on the right side, as well as a list of upcoming events that should be listed there.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith.
No report. Thank you.
Councilmember Sims.
Happy Black History Month. That is all. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Councilmember Scambaluri.
No report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rollo.
Yes, I see my connection may be unstable, so I'll do the best I can. So this concerns trees, and I think many of us here voted for a bicentennial bond a few years back. And part of that bond was to purchase trees for the city on city right of way. And a very good idea, I think. I think that just in terms of beautification of the city, it's a great idea. For carbon capture and sequestration, it's a really good idea. So I support it fully. There are a couple of disappointments that I've encountered. One is that there is sort of a pre-described placement for the trees that didn't involve consulting the homeowner. And a number of the homeowners, for various reasons, wouldn't like to have a tree. And that seems reasonable because they may have other plans, for instance, gardens, or they might interfere with solar panels and so forth. So that is something I think that we need to attend to. I think that I spoke to the urban forester this morning, and she is amenable to people who are not favorable of having trees to contact. I guess I'm muted. Am I muted?
You're fine
Can you
now.
hear me? Okay. I don't know how much you've heard, but the point is that if you aren't favorable of having a tree in your yard, then you can have it reviewed by the urban forester. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that you will have to have a tree. But it's a funny thing that people have been imposed upon to have trees and then need to go through the trouble of objecting to them. When there is a neighborhood that has been requesting trees for a number of years as part of the fulfillment of an infrastructure plan that the city is responsible for, and that was in Gentry Crest. Gentry Crest is a neighborhood that began building out. The developer encountered bankruptcy. And so the homes and the infrastructure, detention pond, roads and so forth weren't completed. The city did complete the roads eventually, did complete the detention plan, but never completed the trees. Now I understand that we are willing to put trees in, but at the cost of the homeowner. And I think that it's rather ironic that some residents in Bloomington have trees that will be essentially imposed on them, and others are requesting it, but can't get them unless they pay for them. So I hope that this is something that could be remedied by the administration, and I just wanted to bring it to the attention of the council. So thank you.
Thank you. In my report this evening, I want to remark about the passing of two individuals in our community that are very beloved and probably known by many of you. Randy Paul, of course, was a tireless activist for accessibility in our community, among so many other things. And we are all very saddened to learn of his death recently. And so our wishes go out to the Paul family, and our thanks to Randy Paul for all that he has contributed to this community. The second very sad passing is Gerard Powell's. Many of you know him or knew him as an attorney. He was in private practice, but I know him as a very gifted actor. He did later in his career come back to a passion of his, which was to be on the stage. And many of his performances for the BPP, for the Cardinal Stage, the Jewish Theater are so very memorable. And his most recent performance was actually in a performance of the Christmas Carol with the IRT in Indianapolis. And both of these gentlemen are gone too soon and will be fondly remembered by all of us in this community. Again, our good thoughts and wishes go out to the Powell's family and the Paul family. Thank you. We now will move on to reports from the mayor and city offices. I understand that the mayor is with us this evening, or at least he has asked if he could make his comments briefly before he must leave for another engagement.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I really appreciate you letting me step in. I'm sorry. I had some unpredicted family matters that changed my schedule tonight, but I wanted to just speak very briefly about the second item on your agenda for action tonight, the Catalent potential investment in our community. And I wanted to speak strongly in favor of that and encourage your support for that. The scale of this investment, potential investment by Catalent, both in terms of capital and jobs, is really extraordinary as a matter, and also extraordinary for a community of our size. Catalent is among our most significant employers, and with this, they will continue to be providing opportunities for people all across the spectrum of skill sets. You know, we work hard to cultivate growth among our employers to offer new jobs. That's a long game in economic development, and this is part of that. Evidenced by it's been kind of 25 years of redevelopment at the Thompson site when we had a major loss of employer there. We are definitely seeing wage growth in Bloomington, also cost of living growth, and we really want to continue to see growth in wages, which this is an excellent part of. As you know, we are competing for this investment from other options that Catalent also has. And the proposed tax abatement in front of you tonight is a strong demonstration of our commitment as a community to continuing to facilitate real career opportunities for our people and protecting ourselves as well from risk. So I know in some ways we wish we weren't in the abatement game nationally, but as a matter of fact, we're doing the best we can with the tools that we have from our tool set and given the realities of the situation. And I just want to thank Catalent for their extraordinary investment to date in the community, and of course, extraordinary involvement in the global response to the pandemic, which we're excited about here. And I also do want to thank the Bloomington Economic Development Corporation and Jen Pearl and her teams for their great work on this, as well as our own Economic and Sustainable Development Group, Alex Crowley, Jane Cooper Smith, and their colleagues as well. I won't speak longer. I know you'll be hearing from Mr. Crowley later tonight. I just wanted to weigh in and encourage you to support this. It's an extraordinary opportunity for our community. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mayor Hamilton. And now we turn our attention to our first opportunity for public comment. And members of the public may speak on matters of community concern that are not listed on our agenda at one of two times for public comments. Citizens may speak at one of these periods, but not for both. And they will be allowed 5 minutes unless we have a large number of people who want to speak, in which we may need to reduce that time. But did I skip over something? I did. Oh my goodness. My apologies to Mr. Smith. Hold off on the public comment. I jumped ahead. We actually have council committee reports this evening that Councilmember Ron Smith will be presenting, and my apologies for jumping ahead. Go ahead, Ron.
That's okay. Thank you, President Sandberg. I'm going to present, if this is going to show up.
We can see it.
Does it look good?
Thank you. Yes, it
Okay. I'm here to present tonight on the Bloomington City Council Transportation Committee report for 2022 about the sidewalk allocation. The full sidewalk allocation funding report may be found on the Transportation Committee site and on the Bloomington City Council website for February 16th, 2022. I don't know if it's if it's there right at the moment, but it will be on the morrow. So if you want to read the full report, it's about 38 pages, somewhat dense material. It'll be there tomorrow. The Common Council Sidewalk Committee is composed of Kate Rosenbarger from District 1, Steve Ullen, District 6, Dave Rollo, District 4, myself, District 3, and with great help and guidance from Ms. Heather Lacey, our Deputy Attorney. Summary of the sidewalk report. The report is in collaboration with city staff. It outlines the committee's recommendations for the use of the funds from the Alternative Transportation Fund. There's about $336,000 budgeted for sidewalk, newly built sidewalks and traffic calming improvements. The committee met a few times and we reviewed ongoing projects, discuss the program criteria, consider new projects, and then the city staff kindly made some recommendations to us to look at and to discuss and to approve. As in the past, additional funds from other various sources through the hand department, through CDBG funding, some of the utility funding. Those are also added in for the totality of our sidewalks in the city. Purpose of the committee and the history of the funding: since 1992, there's been a sidewalk committee that's made recommendations to the city council on funding priorities for sidewalk and traffic calming. These are from the funds that we are in charge of and look at allocating are from the neighborhood parking program, and we're dedicated through the regulations and through Bloomington BMC 15.37.160. This year, $336,000 was appropriated by the committee, which is a little bit of an increase from last year. The recent sidewalk committee initiatives, there were significant revisions in the criteria to allocate sidewalks and allocate the funding for those, and the traffic calming program. So those were improved in an effort to reflect Bloomington's values for fair and equitable allocation of these initiatives. And the committee really wants to extend their sincere thanks to the city staff for their superb work on modifying these processes and their many hours over the course of the last year for their work. So thank you very much. The allocation criteria is used by a city staff to objectively prioritize potential sidewalks and recommend which ones should be designed and built. Often the projects may extend for more than one allocation cycle. In the full report, you'll be able to look at, should you want to see the review of previous allocations, you can see the connection where some sidewalks projects extended a couple of different allocation cycles. Additional information on the criteria that I think is important to make is metrics for the selection were revised. They were weighted, and the map of all missing sidewalks was developed. And these are new initiatives, and they were done extremely well by the city staff and associated folks. I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of last year, the criteria for 2021, we had about 5 different items that were looked at. In 2022, the improved criteria was not only added to and doubled, but they were weighted. And the weighting then produced a score so that we could, the city staff could recommend in an objective fashion the projects that should be given money for to build the new projects, build the new sidewalks. And let's see if this works right. Nope. So I'll ask Mr. Lucas, will you pull up the sidewalk allocations list?
Are you going to have to unshare? Yeah.
I should unshare?
You did
Oh, okay.
before Mr. Lucas can bring up what you've asked.
Are you able to see that map?
Yes. Can you show the list of projects, which is
Oh.
a couple of,
I apologize.
well, that's okay. I appreciate it. So this year for 2022, there were 6 different projects selected. There was right-of-way and construction on Adams. There was a construction Dunn Street, 15th to 16th Street, and one on Overhill from 3rd to 5th. And if you can scroll up a little bit, Mr. Lucas, Liberty Drive, 3rd to 360 South. There was a design on Smith Avenue from College to Walnut, and there's a traffic calming project that was a resident-led project. So that was the total of $336,000. If you would like to scroll through the map now for me a little bit, we can kind of show an overview of the different locations. And let's see. I was going to say, can you scroll a little bit farther down for me so I can, down at that bottom, so we can see which one it is. This is the Adams Street build, Kirkwood to Fountain. And if you continue down, Mr. Lucas, thank you very much. Keep going. This is the sidewalk from Dunn Street, 15th to 16th Street. Thank you very much. Keep going. This is the Overhill Drive between 3rd Street and East 5th Street location. And if you keep going, this is the Liberty Drive south of 3rd Street intersection. Where in the red was showing where the build is going to happen. And if you continue on, this is the West Smith between South College and South of Walnut. This is near the project school, goes right in front of that. That'll be a really great sidewalk to have, safety for everybody. And if you keep going and scroll down a little bit.
Oh, I think that's the last map.
Oh, that's the last one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. And then I guess if you want to unshare and then to see if I can bring back the remainder of my let's see. This is tricky. Can you all see anything?
Not yet.
All right. Well, all right. Maybe I need to do this. Did it come back?
It did.
Okay. So I showed you the list and I showed you some maps and there's the locations. And so that was an allocation that happened this year. And the new criteria will be fully in effect for the next allocation for the 2023. That was spending all the $336,000 with those 6 projects. So I will entertain questions if anybody would like to, and if it's something I can't answer, perhaps city staff will. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Smith. And we will need to have a motion to approve this report. But in the meantime, are there any questions from council regarding the sidewalks report, transportation report? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask about the sidewalk on Smith between College and Walnut, because I know that that's a very narrow street. And so I am surprised that it's even feasible to put a sidewalk in there. but I know we had engineers on helping the committee, and so they must, I'm sure they know what they're doing, but can anybody speak to the potential for putting a sidewalk in there? I don't know if anybody from engineering
I
is
see
here.
2 hands up from other committee members. I see Councilmember
Okay.
Bolden. Do you have a comment?
I defer to Councilmember Rosenbarger, but I'd like to have a say on it too.
Okay, Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Sure. I was just going to say what we talked about in the Transportation Committee, now Sidewalk Committee, is they don't know if the sidewalk will be feasible there. Most likely to put in a sidewalk, it would entail buying right of way, which is literally physical buildings. And so that might not be what happens, but they want to study it and figure out how they can make some sort of space there and like change the Smith between College and Walnut to have a place for pedestrians.
Thank you
So,
for remembering that.
so what would the $21,000 be used for for this project?
So that's pretty much the first step in like design. And I don't know if it's actually like design at that point, but just almost like a feasibility study of the street.
Thank you very much. That leads me to another question, but if there are others, I'll wait.
Yes, if you'd like to follow up, and then Councilmember Bolden, did you have a question?
I'll hear her. I'll hear her other question. Maybe I can help.
Okay. Thank you.
So my other question came up at my constituent meeting this weekend, and it's a question about the design phase of these sidewalk projects and whether that's done in-house or whether that is usually done by a consultant or somebody on contract with the city. Do you know?
I
actually don't know.
Mr. Volin, did you have an answer to that?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think that depends on the complexity of the project, but it'd be better answered by a planning staff member.
Is there anyone from planning here?
I'm looking on the. See if there's anybody there. I don't see anybody from planning. President Sandberg.
Okay.
So that's something that I can send a note to Mr. Copper and ask him to reply to that question, Councilmember Piedmont Smith, and get you an answer.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Councilmember Bolden, did you have anything else?
I was just going to say, you know, that particular block is also the block on which is found the project school, and the children use 3rd Street Park as their playground. It's a really good example of urban school design, and the sidewalk there has a lot to do with the north side of it. Of course, is the sidewalk goes right up to the school entrance, and you know, there is room for a sidewalk, but it does require a different way of thinking, you know, than a typical street. And but I mean, that's why it's an important project, but they can get sidewalks on both sides. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Sims, did I see a hand?
Thank you. I didn't have a question, but I saw Mr. Lucas was on the screen, and I didn't know if he wanted to speak to about the conceptual designing and what that funding and how it works, if he had anything to contribute, because he's always with us in those meetings. That would help answer Councilmember Piedmont Smith's question about the design.
Yes, thank you. It's my understanding that the city contracts out for most of that design work. That's why we budget specifically for that. And you'll note on that particular project, the Smith Avenue, the recommended amount from the committee totals $21,000, and I think the total ballpark design cost that staff provided was $50,000. So this would cover only a portion of the design work, and may lead to staff, you know, adjusting what they recommend moving forward with this particular area. So that's all I was going to add. I would still be happy to follow up with engineering staff to confirm that, but I'd be surprised if we did any of the design work here in-house, if we're specifically budgeting for it, here. So.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, I do believe we need a motion for approval of this report, and we thank you for it, Councilmember Smith.
Madam President, would you like to allow public to comment on the report?
Oh, all right. If there's anyone here from the public who would like to comment on the transportation report. Mr. Lucas, can we identify?
Yes, I see several hands raised, and perhaps I'll just mention this is an opportunity to comment on the Transportation Committee report that was just presented. If you're here to provide a general public comment, there should be an opportunity to do so immediately following this agenda item. So if you would like to comment now, please raise your hand, which several folks have already done so. You can find that raise hand option either in the Reactions tab or the More tab in your control bar, or if you're not able to locate it in either of those locations, please just send a chat to the meeting host and we'll recognize you that way. And first up, I see Councilor Ryan, who should be able to unmute now.
Hello.
Madam Chair, please.
We are unable to hear.
Pardon? Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes. Do you have a comment about the transportation report?
Yes. Do you mind if you let me share my screen?
Yes, please.
Yes, please. Thank you.
No,
It's
no
disabled.
screen sharing.
Madam Chair, no screen sharing.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear him. No, I'm sorry, no screen sharing.
It's just, I've got my notes written down. I've got social anxiety.
Mr. Lucas, can you assist this particular commenter? Maybe he would be able to make a comment in the chat.
Yes, I'm happy to see if he'd like to provide comments in another manner.
Thank you.
Next up is iPhone.
Hello. My name is Abol. I have a very good question.
Mr. Lucas, are we, I hate to suggest this, but
Your transporting is shit.
are we being Zoom bombed? I do believe.
Yes, we are.
What is a Zoom bomb?
All right, we need to put an end to this one.
Next up is Greg Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. You may unmute and make your comment.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, my name is Greg Alexander. I really appreciate and respect the work done by both the city staff and the committee members on this project. I use some of the sidewalks that have been funded this way, and the upcoming sidewalks are going to be useful to me as well, and they're a valuable part of the city's transportation network. I feel like I have to point out yet again, this is a $50 million problem that we're chipping off, $300,000 at a time. And so there are a lot of worthy sidewalks that aren't being built, and there are a lot of more worthy sidewalks that are explicitly excluded from this process simply because they're too big, they're too expensive to build. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. One last speaker, perhaps?
Yes, last is DJT.
Hi, just a very quick question. Are the meetings of this, the minutes of this meeting going to be posted online anywhere?
Yes, meeting videos are recorded and posted on our local community access television website.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I believe that concludes public comment unless you see some additional ones, Mr. Lucas.
I do not know.
All right. So at this time, it would be appropriate to make a motion to approve the report.
Well, it is customary to have council comments on the report as well.
Oh, certainly. Any council comments before we go to the vote? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I'd just like to express my appreciation to both the committee members and especially the Planning and Transportation staff. I think it was Mallory Rickbile who spent a lot of time along with community member Mark Stossberg on enhancing our criteria to make sure we take into account social equity and fairness in distributing our funds, and in particular to target our funds to underserved communities. So I think those additions to the criteria, I know, the percentages were kind of small for those social equity concerns because, of course, safety is still our number one priority. But I think those added criteria have really enhanced this process, and I greatly appreciate the time spent on developing them and implementing them. So happy to support the recommendations.
Thank you. Any other council comments? Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Thank you. I just want to echo Councilmember Piedmont Smith's thank you to city staff. Planning and Transportation and Engineering was in on a lot of that with us. I think expanding, and especially also Committee Chair Councilmember Smith, I think just leading this was really awesome. So thank you for that. And I think the criteria have been expanded so much, and I know they just spent hours and hours on this, and I feel really, really good now that we as a council have a very, it's a pretty objective approach now to addressing where to spend our relatively small pot of sidewalk funding. I really like one change that Councilmember Smith talked about in the reports, but instead of just using that list of sidewalks that people added to on their own, the transportation and planning staff created a citywide sidewalk map. So we now consider every single space where there's a missing link in our sidewalk connectivity. And I think that is also a really important change in terms of equity and safety for our city. So I know some of us were kind of considering bringing up a conversation with council about eliminating the sidewalk committee, but I was one of those. But I think this criteria now is really good, and I think with our city goals and our transportation plan and our comp plan, I think this really is us taking a step in the right direction to meet those goals over time. So just again, a big thanks to everyone involved in this.
Thank you. Additional comments? Councilmember Rollo, I see a hand.
I'd like to express my thanks to the city staff. I think that having a revised format of evaluating the criteria to evaluate is good, is a good step. It was always a consideration of the Sidewalk Committee to consider equity, and there are numerous projects that have been funded in the past, so it's not as though that was absent in the past. The comments by Mr. Alexander, I think, are really spot on. There are so many sidewalks that are needed, and the Sidewalk Committee cannot possibly, with its directive to essentially put sidewalks in areas for connectivity between side paths and sidewalks, that $350,000 alone simply can't, it's not adequate to address the need. And some of those projects will have to find funding elsewhere. But I would recommend that the staff and the administration really get to work on developing some kind of comprehensive plan. And perhaps it requires a special funding mechanism that we've discussed in the past, for instance, bonding, in order to complete it, the need, because it's simply not going to occur with a modest sidewalk budget that we have at our disposal. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Flaherty.
Thank you. First, just thanks to the committee for all of your work on this. And then just wanted to further echo the points of Mr. Alexander and Councilmember Rallo that we really should be spending millions of dollars a year on sidewalks, not 600,000 or 700,000. A good analog is the replacement of water piping and maybe wastewater piping as well in the city. We have something like 400 miles of pipe. The average lifespan is about 100 years. And we were nowhere close to on track to replacing pipe on an adequate schedule to keep up with that average need. It's a pretty simple math problem. You've got to replace, well, here I say simple and I'm trying to do the math in my head and I'm not getting it. I mean, the point is you can figure out how much you need to build each year to make this problem sustainable. I don't know how long the average lifespan of a sidewalk is or how many miles of gaps there are, but like we should actually be able to come up with that number of what is the need, even if we fall short of it, even if it's $5-6 million a year and we can't do that right now, it still helps to make the case and identify again and highlight the need for substantially more funding. And that could be accomplished through bonds. I know we've got consideration of some bonding in that capacity possibly coming in the near future. But I think, you know, the consideration for just a larger portion of the city's annual budget being dedicated to this purpose than has traditionally been dedicated to the alternative transportation fund would be a good idea. And that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Additional comments from council? Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. I just want to congratulate Chairman Smith and the Sidewalk Committee. In my comments, and I have to agree with everything we just heard and some of the comments my council members just made and Mr. Alexander. But this has been in the making for a while with the product that we saw tonight with the report and all the results. It's been in the pipeline or in the making for a while. And I think it's important, and I will say that I think this is how we foresaw it to work in the first place. It'd just be nice if we had millions instead of 100,000s to work with. But there's been some mention, and I do want to emphasize a little bit with regard to criteria. It was mentioned about Mr. Stossberg's report and how some of those elements were used as to enhance the criteria from fairness and social equity and those considerations. And I think it's important to recognize Beth Rosenberger and Mallory Rickbile. And I'm sure I'm missing someone, but I do know that those two were working very intently on incorporating some of those ideas into the criteria from the staff standpoint. And that's kind of a result of where we are today. So I really wanted to recognize that, recognize the input from Mr. Stossberg, some of that we use, and from some of the members of our public and my colleagues. So thank you. I'll support this recommendation.
Thank you. Additional comments? Mr. Flaherty, Councilmember Flaherty.
Just a quick answer to my simple math problem of 4 miles per year is the pipe that needing replaced. Sorry for failing on the spot.
Thank you. I couldn't do it. Councilmember Sims.
Just make a comment. I think in previous meetings, we've talked about it's about $1 million per linear mile, if I'm not mistaken, of sidewalks. So just put some things in perspective. But I think Councilmember Flaherty is absolutely correct.
All right, thank you. Any additional comments? All right, seeing none, are we ready for a motion?
Madam President, I move the approval of the Council Transportation Committee report and funding recommendations for 2022.
And
I'd like to second that.
All right, moved and seconded, and will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Sims,
Yes.
Volan,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Yeah.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
and Rosenbarger.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And that passes 900. And thank you once again to the committee. We now move to public comment. You've already heard my spiel about this first section, this first opportunity to make a comment about matters not on this evening's agenda. And if we can see a show of hands to get an idea how many people we have wanting to talk about things that we're not going to talk about later. And Mr. Lucas, if you could help us, traffic control.
Yes, I see 2 hands raised at the moment. And first up, I received a request from Chris MG to comment, and he should now be able to unmute.
All right, thank you. And I believe we will have 5 minutes or less at this point. Thank you.
No, thank you, Madam President. Good evening, council members. This is Christopher MG, the new advocacy director at the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to take the opportunity to introduce myself and pledge our continued commitment to the ideals of a better business, a better community. While the chamber represents business interests that goes beyond zoning and regulation issues, we believe an improved quality of place directly influences the business climate as well. Finally, I want the chamber to be a resource for the council where we can provide cover on some very important issues. Thank you for your time. I look forward to engaging with each one of you.
Thank you, Mr. MG. Next up.
Next is Greg Alexander.
Thank you. You have 5 minutes.
Hi, great, thank you. My name is Greg Alexander. I was thinking about preparing slides for this presentation, but my heart really isn't in it. I'm not a good photographer. I don't have a good camera. It would take a lot of my time and not make a very good result. You know, I saw Dave Askins took a great photo of a pedestrian walking in Walnut Street, and I know just enough about cameras that I could appreciate how far beyond my ability that photo was. But I do have a tiny piece of data for you that doesn't begin to represent the enormity of the problem. It stopped snowing on Friday the 4th. Today is Wednesday the 16th, almost 2 weeks later. It was 60 degrees today. We have had so many melt days, but just 3 hours ago today, I went to 14th and College and I measured amount of snow 12 inches high, completely blocking the College Avenue bike lane. And I went to 11th and Fairview under the rail bridge and I measured amount of snow on the sidewalk. That's only 9 inches high. And I mean that, only 9 inches. An able-bodied adult can finally step over that pile, most improved. Yesterday, it was 17 inches, and a week ago, it was 29 inches. 29 inches of snow on the sidewalk. That snow didn't just fall from the sky. It was pushed into bike and ped infrastructure by city plows. I'm so demoralized to keep telling you this. 3 years ago, I came to nearly every meeting and said, there are no sidewalks, the sidewalks are blocked, and people are walking in the street. Well, I don't know if I made any friends that way, but did anybody really doubt me? We know with our own eyes. Public Works spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on a single snow event, and almost none of that transfers into sidewalk maintenance. In fact, a lot of it directly damages sidewalks. In that time, I can point to some baby steps at the council. The Director of Housing and Neighborhood came during budget last year and said they don't believe HAND is responsible for sidewalks. I think that was a huge step. Public Works has come again and again and told this body they're doing the best they can, but they steadfastly refuse to ask for the resources to do better. And frankly, a lot of claims made by the Director of Public Works simply haven't been true. Now, engineering, planning, and transportation, man, they're paralyzed with administrative politics. They can't come to this body. Functionally, they aren't structured so they could come to this body and implicitly criticize another department. They can't say that the current approach is failing and that Public Works needs to step up to the plate and take a swing. Stalemate. And I'm just left wondering, how can this body be all right with this? How can you guys know and accept the continuing lack of progress? After all my work, are you still ignorant of the problem? Should I invest in a better camera and show you the faces of all the people walking in the streets? Perhaps a little poverty pornography would move the needle. Should I invite you to profile them? Do you want to see a family with young kids, bad teeth, and torn coats standing in the street beside a bus stop that has snow mounted over it? What does it take to get you guys to admit we need to change the way this has been done? Why are you all right with the status quo? I keep remembering the ordinance a year ago where a minority of this body attempted to decriminalize homelessness and met a brick wall. I respect there were real flaws with that ordinance, but it's a year later and I'm still waiting for the majority to come back with a counter proposal. But that's not going to happen, is it? I get the hint. Sometimes I think this body's interest in bike and ped transportation only extends to projects that look like gentrification. The idea of it being a tool to provide meaningful transportation options for people who don't have any money to spare just isn't going to fly here. I'm pretty sad about it, to be honest. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Do we have additional public comment?
I don't believe so, no.
All right, seeing no additional public comment, we move on to the next agenda item, which are appointments to our boards and commissions, and our interview teams have been very busy. So what I would like to propose is we'll take our teams first and see if we have any appointments for boards and commissions from Team A. And I'm not seeing any hands raised. I'm seeing a no. Do we have any recommendations from Team B? Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, on the recommendation of Team B, I would like to move to appoint Mitch Rice to seat C3 of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Commission.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Do you have more appointments to boards and commissions? Do we need to vote on these individually?
Madam President, we had a discussion among our committee members. Our approach that we decided to take was a separate motion and recommendation for each board or commission, as opposed to all 5 boards and commission recommendations at one time, as sort of a middle ground between literally recommending appointment or reappointment of everyone versus the far other extreme of only appointing 1 seat at a time. There are, of course, some pros and cons to either. You know, we could have a motion to separate the question, I suppose, if you know, somebody really wanted to vote yes on one and no on another when there's multiple appointments at the same time. But that's where we landed. Is the intent of this committee is to have
Very
5
good. So you
motions,
actually,
1 for each board or commission to which we are making recommendations.
Okay, you actually do have 5 different boards or commissions to deal with, but we'll deal with them one at a time, and that's fine. So you have nominated Mitch Rice for C3 of Bicycle and Ped, is that correct?
Correct.
All right, and that's been seconded. So do we need to do a roll call on this? I assume we do. Madam Clerk?
Okay. Councilmember Volin,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
and Sims.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That is approved. Congratulations to Mitch Rice. And our next recommendation. Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, I'd like to move the reappointment of Sarah Riderband to seat C3 and Ryan Shade to seat C6 of the Traffic Commission.
Second.
Moved and seconded. And will the clerk please call the roll? You are,
Yeah, sorry, I was finishing up the motion. Councilmember Scambalori,
Yes.
Sandberg,
yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Volin.
Yes.
Thank you. And Ms. Riderband and Mr. Shade have been reappointed. And do we have another recommendation? Councilmember Volin?
Madam Chair, I'd like to move to recommend to reappoint Megan Parmenter to seat C1 and Jeff Amon to seat C3 of the Utility Service Board.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Boland,
Yes.
and Scandalori.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Parmenter and Mr. Eman have been reappointed. Do we have another recommendation? From Team B, does that conclude your appointments?
Madam Chair, I'd like to move that to recommend the reappointment of Jessica Davis to seat C1 and James Sanders to seat C2 of the Martin Luther King Jr. Birthday Celebration Commission.
Moved
Second.
and seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Rallo,
Yes.
But excuse me,
Yes. Councilmember
Madam,
Smith?
sorry, Madam President. I had a question based on a memo provided by the clerk's office. Is Jessica Davis has she already been appointed by the mayor?
yes, my apologies, she was.
So we don't need to appoint her, reappoint her.
Do we need to have a new recommendation stated?
I'll have to restate it then. I'll move to recommend the reappointment of James Sanders to seat C2 of the Martin Luther King Jr. Birthday Celebration Commission.
Second?
All right, that's been moved and seconded. Now are we ready to call the roll on that one reappointment or appointment?
Okay,
Madam
so
Clerk?
go ahead and go. All right, sorry about that, y'all. Councilmember Rallo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Boland,
Yes.
Scandalori,
Yes.
and Sandberg.
Yes. Thank you. And that appointment has been made for Mr. James Sanders. And do we have one last recommendation from Team B? Councilmember Volan.
Yes, I'd like to move to rename, can't talk, to name Nana Amoa Rami to seat C1 of the Commission on the Status of Women.
Second?
All right, that appointment has been moved and seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Flaherty,
Yes.
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Boland,
Yes.
Scandalori,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
and Rallo.
Yes.
Thank you all. And that appointment has been made. Does that conclude Team B's work here? Okay, I see a head nod. We will now move on to Team C with our recommendations for vacancies for boards and commissions.
Madam President, the recommendations from Team C consist of the following. We recommend the appointment of Chris Durbon to seat C4 on the Historic Preservation Commission.
Second?
Are we doing these one at a time as did Team B?
We're doing it in the same
Okay. very
same
good.
method.
All right, so that has been moved and seconded. And Madam Clerk, if you would call the roll.
Okay, Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Boland,
Yes.
Scandalori,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
and Flaherty.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That appointment has been made and we have others.
Madam President, I move the appointment of Chris Corey to seat C1 and Gerard Panakoic to seat C4 on the Bloomington Arts Commission.
Second?
Moved and seconded, and will Madam Clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
and Smith.
Yes.
Thank you. And those appointments have been made to the Arts Commission.
Madam President, I
yes.
move reappointment of Diaro Baez to seat C1 and Francisco Ruiz Limas to seat C4 on this Commission on Hispanic and Latino Affairs.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Will Madam Clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
and Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Thank you. Those appointments have been made, and moving on to the next. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Madam President, I move that we reappoint Colin Murphy to seat C4 on the Commission on Sustainability and appoint Matt Austin to seat C3 on that same commission and Sarah Congress to seat C5. These are all for the Commission on Sustainability.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Sims,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
and Rosenbarger.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Those appointments have been made, and I do believe we have one last commission. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, Madam President, I move that the council reappoint Tracy Gates to seat C1 and Eoban Binder to seat C3 of the Parking Commission.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Will the clerk please call that roll?
Yes, Councilmember Volin,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
and Sims.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have been hard at work. I do appreciate all the work of the interview teams for getting these vacancies filled. Thank you so very much. We have one more order of business with regard to boards and commissions, and I do believe Councilmember Scambalori.
Yes, thank you. Madam President, I move that the Common Council approve and ratify the following mayoral appointments to the Historic Preservation Committee. The names and their respective seats are Marlene Newman, seat M1, Doug Bruce, seat M2, Daniel Schlegel, seat M3, Sam DeSaller, seat M4, John Saunders, seat M6, Elizabeth Mitchell, seat M7, Allison Chopra, seat M8, and Raynard Cross, seat M9.
All right, we've had a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion about this before we call the roll? All right, Councilmember Rallo.
Thank you. I just received the request from the mayor's office this afternoon about this slate of appointments to the HPC, and I haven't had adequate time to review these applicants. Given that, I'll be abstaining this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comment from council? Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, President Sandberg. I'm going to echo Mr. Rallo's reticence in ratifying these, and I will be abstaining as well, as I just received the notification of these appointments late today as well. So I'll be abstaining as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments? And seeing none, let's call the roll on these mayoral appointments to the Historic Preservation Commission.
Councilmember Scambalori,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Abstain.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Abstain.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
and Volin.
Yes.
All right, those appointments are approved. And I do believe that concludes our boards and commission appointments for this evening. We are now ready to move on to legislation for second readings and resolutions.
Madam President, I move that resolution 2205 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
and Scambalori.
Yes.
Thank you. And will the clerk please read?
Yes. Resolution 2205 to designate an economic revitalization area, approve the statement of benefits, and authorize an abatement period for real property improvements and personal property regarding properties at 1300 South Patterson Drive, Catalin, Indiana, LLC petitioner. The synopsis is as follows. This resolution designates 9 parcels located at and around 1300 South Patterson Drive as an economic revitalization area for Catalin, Indiana, LLC. The designation was recommended by the Economic Development Commission on January 31st, 2022, and will enable the proposed $350 million project, including the real and personal property improvements, to be eligible for tax abatement. The resolution approves petitioner's statement of benefits, authorizes a 10-year period of abatement for real property improvements, a 20-year period of abatement for personal property, and sets the deduction schedules for each. The resolution also declares the intent of the council to hold a public hearing on March 2nd, 2022 to hear public comment on the ERA designation.
Thank you.
I move
And-
that resolution 2205 be adopted.
Second.
All right, and with us this evening to present, I do believe we have our Economic and Sustainable Development Director, Mr. Crowley.
Thank you, President Sandberg. I'm going to give Jane Cooper Smith, my terrific colleague, an opportunity to share her screen. She's going to run the presentation while I talk. So good evening, council members and members of the public. I'm Alex Crowley, Director of Economic and Sustainable Development for the City of Bloomington. I'm pleased to be here this evening with you to speak about this exciting potential opportunity. As you'll see from the agenda on the next slide, Oh, I think she's having trouble with
Is
it.
it moving?
Yeah, here we go. I will begin with an overview of some of the information we've included in your council packet supporting Resolution 2205. I will then ask Catalent to provide a brief overview of their facility and potential plans. And then I will return to delve deeper into our recommendations. We look forward to answering any questions you may have following our remarks. Before I go into the details, I wanted to start with some preliminary thoughts, echoing Mayor Hamilton's earlier points. First, allow me to underscore how extraordinary the scale of this investment and job growth would be, and how extremely rare this is for a community our size. The capital investment would nearly double the investment on the site since Thompson announced its departure 25 years ago. Second, we have to recognize that Bloomington is competing for this growth. Catalent has not made a decision yet about it, and as they will detail later, they have other US facilities with similarly strong biologics capabilities. We stack up well, but this investment is very much in play right now. Third, we have designed this incentive to minimize our risk. If Catalent doesn't invest or grow jobs at these commitment levels, we are not out of pocket, and they don't realize any value in the incentive. Furthermore, there's a statutory annual reporting requirement that will provide us an opportunity to evaluate Catalent's performance. And finally, and perhaps most important, while an abatement is provided to a corporation, the benefits of their investment and our investment are in the end realized by individual workers, people who are given the opportunity to land jobs and careers both in the company and in the community through overall economic multiplication. This is one move in a long game that ultimately strengthens our community. So let me start by taking us back in time to 1997, when Thompson RCA decided somewhat unexpectedly to leave Bloomington and take its production facility to Mexico. At that time, the impact of the departure was devastating for Bloomington. A government task force estimated the plant directly or indirectly provided 2,350 jobs in the community and had a total annual economic impact, including wages, supplies, and spending by its workers, of $277 million. A lot of individual workers lost their jobs and livelihoods. Small neighborhood businesses serving the plant lost their incomes. This was a major blow to Bloomington and to the region. Mayor Fernandez, City Council, and other community leaders rallied together to organize a significant effort to prepare the site for redevelopment, including setting up a community revitalization enhancement district and other mechanisms for public investment. Today, we're seeing the continued success of that original effort, and we have an opportunity to build on it. Since that original work, we've seen Cook Pharmica take over the facility and invest significantly in its revitalization. Cook has been a major investor in Bloomington over the years, as you know, and we owe Cook a debt of gratitude for Bloomington's current vibrancy. Cook's participation in the revitalization of the Thompson site was critical too. Then in 2019, Catalent purchased Cook Pharmica for nearly $1 billion and have since made significant additional capital investments and have expanded the workforce nearly fourfold. As you'll hear from Catalent, the company is heavily involved in a number of production activities here in Bloomington, including their work on the COVID vaccines, and are considering this significant additional investment and jobs and production capabilities. I will now turn the screen over to Andrew Espejo, General Manager of the Bloomington facility.
Thank you, Alex. Let me start sharing my screen so I can bring up the presentation. And I want to make sure I do this properly. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you, Madam President, distinguished council members, and citizens of the Bloomington public. Thank you for allowing me to present to you this evening. My name is Andrew Espejo. I am the General Manager for the Catalent Bloomington site. With me tonight, also presenting, is Grant Eccles. Grant is our Director of Facilities and Engineering at the site. I wanted to share these slides with you, just to give you a brief overview of Catalent and Catalent Bloomington. But first, I would like to share a video from one of our distinguished colleagues at the site, Tiara May. Tiara is an associate project coordinator at our site, and she has recorded a video for you. It's really about patients and patient firsts. And I'll share that why that is so important to us in a few moments.
My name is Tiara, and I'm in the project management department at the Bloomington site. Our family, we are Native Americans from the Cherokee tribe. My grandma was one of the first people to receive the vaccine in our community because she's a Cherokee language speaker, which is starting to become rare in our community. And, you know, we are working very hard to preserve our culture and our community and our language, because if we lose our language, we lose our identity. When I got to see my grandma and hug her for the first time after, you know, getting vaccinated, that was powerful. I had a role in a small part of that, and I definitely look at my role and my job and my position just a little different now. My team and our company just does such a good job at keeping the big picture and keeping us encouraged and focused and driven on the goal, and that's to make sure that we help our patients live better, healthier lives.
Tiara embodies all that we mean and do at Catalent. One of our core values is patient first, and we take that value very, very seriously, because the products that we make here at Catalent touch millions of lives throughout the globe. It's one of the pure benefits of being in our industry, to create and to make, manufacture, and distribute products and medicines that help prolong people's lives, save people's lives, and give them a better life expectancy. So I just wanted to share that video with you. Okay, I want to give you a brief overview of Catalent, a brief overview of Bloomington, the site here, our sustainability goals, initiatives, and our expansion and plans and scope with you tonight. Just a brief overview of Catalent as a company. Our mission is to develop and supply products that help people live better, healthier lives. We span all areas of the pharmaceutical manufacturing spectrum, from oral solid dosages, biotherapeutics, cell and gene therapy, inhalation, and consumer health products. We have several modes of manufacturing. These include our development activities, our superior delivery technologies, our global clinical supply network, and our modalities of manufacturing. And these include biologics, these include the sterile dosages. It spans the entire spectrum of the pharmaceutical industry. Like Alex said earlier, we are a global network of 60 sites spanning 4 continents. As you could see here, North America, Europe, Latin America, and the Asia Pacific area. Specifically, in our biologics network, we have 5 sites in North America, 3 sites in Europe. And we, as a company, we undergo activities to grow our individual sites. As general managers, we have the responsibility to grow the business. We have the distinct honor here at Bloomington of being the largest biologics manufacturing facility in the network for Catalent. And I might say my 22 plus years experience in pharmaceutical manufacturing, we are probably one of the largest sites in North America that manufactures pharmaceutical medicines. A little bit about Catalent Bloomington. We are an award-winning facility with a fully integrated development, drug substance, drug product, and packaging capabilities. And what does that mean? When we talk about development, the process for approving drugs in the US and in the EU and other countries is the companies that develop the pharmaceutical products go through a clinical phase process. We manufacture and we help companies develop those products to go into the clinical phases. It's a lengthy process. And then once it is approved past clinical phase 3, they go into commercial. And that's what we mean. We, in development, we help those companies manufacture products, design and develop the delivery mechanisms at that stage. A drug substance in our industry is what we call the active pharmaceutical ingredient in biologics production. It's the cell bank. So we manufacture the cells that go into the final drug product. And that's what we mean by a drug product, whether it's a vial or a syringe that gets either injected or infused into the patient. And then we do package those products. We do final packaging, we do bulk packaging. We also manufacture what we call auto injectors. If you are familiar with the epinephrine product, it's an auto injector that a patient would place the auto injector on their leg or their arm and self-inject, and that's what we call an auto injector. It's a combination medical device that we do assemble here at our site in Bloomington. A little like Alex said before, Catalent acquired the site from Cook Pharmica in 2017. Since then, we have invested over $500 million into this site. We have over 2,400 full-time employees. We've added over 2,400 full-time employees, and we have an average salary of more than $60,000 per year. Just a little bit of some facts, some numbers, so to speak, about Catalent here in Bloomington. We manufacture over 160 molecules. Molecules are the different entities that we manufacture for our customers. We have 65 clients that we currently manufacture pharmaceutical products for. 18 of these are the top 25 biopharmaceutical companies in the world. We're very proud of this. We have great partnerships. We have great alliances with these pharmaceutical companies. Our facility spans over 1 million square feet. As I mentioned before, our capabilities are, we have development capabilities, drug substance manufacturing, drug product and packaging. Right now, we have over 3,200 wonderful colleagues, such as Tiara that you saw earlier, here at our site. And our products span the spectrum of medicines and indications. These include infectious disease, oncology, metabolic and cardiovascular diseases, neurosciences, and inflammatory diseases. And we are very proud of the portfolio of products that we make for our patients globally. And we are a very, very patient-focused organization. We are 80% of our products are biologics, which represents the highest complexity of pharmaceutical products in the world. I'm going to invite Grant to join us at this point to talk about our environmental, social, and government efforts at the site. Grant, are you there?
Are they able to unmute?
Hello. Hi, this is Grant Eccles. Yes, I'm in now. All right. Well, thank you, Andrew. As Andrew started with the presentation, we were starting talking about patient first. Acting with integrity, responsibility, sustainability are also really core to our fundamentals here at Catalent. And as part of that, we've established significant global energy reduction goals, and we're committed. We've made a commitment to the Science-Based Target Initiative to take action and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and to ultimately limit global warming. Globally, Catalent does procure 97% of its electricity through renewable energy sources. And here locally, we take action to drive down our energy usage as well, and are on track to deliver over a 15% reduction in our energy usage over a 4-year period. And through efforts like LED improvements across the entire facility and solar panels limited with a number of light poles and stop signs throughout our facility.
Okay, thank you, Grant. I do want to share a little bit about our diversity, equity, inclusion efforts here at Catalent in Bloomington. We're very proud of the initiatives we have embarked on this year to develop a strategic diversity partnership with schools and professional organizations, most notably in the STEM and the science, technology, engineering, and math area. Our implementation of a diverse slate of recruiting for managers and higher levels. Something that's near and dear to my heart, the adoption of the Shingo Guiding Principles model with emphasis on two core foundational elements of the Shingo model, which is respect for every individual and leading with humility. This is something we're very proud of implementing this year. We have increased the number of employees requiring visa sponsorships, and we have established focus groups for our diversity, equity, inclusion, and collect feedback. We are on target for being above the market availability for females in all employment level categories. I do want to share that we have 8 employee resource groups. These are our core groups within our organization. They're strictly voluntary. They stretch from adapt to serve, for learn, aspire, rise up. These are groups for employees to come together, develop a strategy for driving the diversity inclusion at the site. They do a lot of great work within the community, and we're very proud of their activity. And this year, our Adapt and Serve ERGs are sponsoring a Memorial Day ceremony for the site participants. We're really, really excited about that. And the latest Bloomington Employee Engagement Survey indicates that our diversity and inclusion is the highest rated category among employees at 75%. And that's a testimony to the efforts that every single person here at Catalent Bloomington puts into making sure that every single person that comes to work at our site here in Bloomington can be their true selves. We really believe that our colleagues, when they can be their true self at work, they will be a happier colleague. And that's what we want, truly to have inspired and motivated colleagues at the site. I'll let Grant take you through our main campus and the areas of focus for us.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Yeah, it's fun with Alex showing the historical Thompson picture, and I like to think that we're building a whole new version of Thompson today under Catalent and the legacy Cook Pharmica, and it's fun to see this campus grow up to 62 acres across 4 buildings, with the recent additions of the former Best Beers property and the IMI property to our south, the former concrete plant. And as part of this investment that we're talking about tonight, we're exploring a number of investments across each of these facilities and really looking to bring additional capacity to produce more drug substance, fill more vials, fill more syringes, build additional device products, auto injectors that Andrew talked about, and ultimately packaging capabilities, really a one-stop shop for our clients to come be partners and help us deliver amazing life-improving and life-saving therapies to our patients, and do so in a reliable manner. Just be world-class in a biopharmaceutical environment. It's really a great opportunity and great potential for the city of Bloomington. And as we look at this project, we go to the next slide. Right, we are looking at upwards of 1,000 jobs with an average wage of $32 per hour. The median is in the $28 to $30 range. As we said, the investment's upwards of up to $350 million. In a variety of different types of improvements. So as I mentioned, some equipment as well as some land improvements, and then timeline up through 2026. So really looking to make investments here in this calendar year up over the next 5 years. And with that, Andrew, if we have time.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Grant. I appreciate the time. I do have one last patient first video from another colleague of ours. If I have the opportunity to share that, I think it would be great. And let's see if I can get that to show for you now.
I'm CJ Fields. I'm equipment lead for inspection. I was just kind of feeling drowsy one day, and I started getting a fever, and it turned into a little bit more. I got COVID April 25th, 2020, 13 days after my 30th birthday. Got admitted right away, and I was on oxygen right away. getting rushed to the ICU. I remember all that. And then they were just telling me once I got in the ICU, they put a CPAP machine on me, which covered your whole face. And then I woke up in Indianapolis at IU Methodist 18 days later. I had no muscle at all. I couldn't walk. I couldn't go to the restroom. And I always had to have assistance doing something. It took several days for me to be able to come to and then get my strength up. And when I got to my hometown, someone organized a police escort to the house. And that really meant a lot to me. And then after getting home, people were driving past the house. And of course, that was a pretty emotional day. Would never want anybody to go through what I went through. So if the vaccine helps to do that, I would recommend taking it. Working for Catalent, it feels amazing. Knowing what they're doing, helping people not go through what I did. First day I've started here, it's patient first. And it's important to me because I was that patient working for a company that's, helping the world right now. It's amazing.
Thank you all for your time this evening. We are very proud of the company we work for, the products that we make, and the patients that we serve throughout the world. We firmly believe we are making a difference in this global effort against the pandemic, and we're proud to be a part of that solution. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Espejo and Mr. Eccles. Mr. Crowley, do you have any final words before we go to council questions?
Yes, I do. If I may pick up from that and continue with my presentation.
Yes, please.
Okay, Jane, if you could, there we go. So first of all, thank you, Andrew and Grant. I echo Mayor Hamilton's thanks to you and to Catalent for your work here in Bloomington and around the world. Turning back to the opportunity at hand, I want to reiterate the extraordinary nature of the proposed investment in terms of jobs, wages, and production capabilities. I'd like to focus first on wages, notably that Catalent's commitment is to an average wage of $32 per hour, which equates to an average annual salary of $66,560, excluding benefits and overtime. I should point out that the resolution incorrectly lists that figure at $30 per hour, which we can correct in the confirmatory resolution. So why is that wage level important to us? If you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics average weekly wages, and Jane, if you could go to the next slide. There we go. You'll see a picture over the past 5 years of a Bloomington that struggled with wages relative to comparable data sets, but is seeing some recent improvements. We want to build on that improvement. You'll see on this chart that in Q1 2017, we ranked at the bottom of the comparison set, and I've used the national average, the statewide average, and a handful of other Indiana cities as our comparison. In 2018, the second bar from the bottom, where the rest of the group saw increased wages, we were almost stagnant. We advanced somewhat in 2019, the middle bar in these graphs, but remained behind the pack. Then, starting in 2020 and again in 2021, we've seen wage growth more aligned with national and statewide averages and are now ahead of our fellow Indiana cities. That's all very encouraging, but it's only part of the picture. At the same time, next slide, please. At the same time, we're seeing significant increases in the cost of housing and other costs of living. Looking specifically at housing, you'll see here that home ownership in the Bloomington MSA is accelerating since 2017 and accelerating faster than the state average. Bloomington is the blue line and the state is the gray line. The last 2 years have especially seen significant increases. This is good if you're a homeowner, but not if you're trying to buy a home. On the rental side of the equation, which as you know is the higher proportion of the housing in our community, the situation is similar. While this data only represents apartment complexes with 16 or more units, the general trend line is the same. We see a market not letting up much through 2020 and continuing to see significant demand as reflected in the occupancy rates overlaid in the chart. Taken together, we're making gains on wages, which is good to see, but we're at the same time losing ground on cost of living, which makes it all the more important to retain grow, and attract good paying jobs in the community. As you see here, Catalent is providing job opportunities across all skill levels, with a substantial portion of significantly higher levels than Bloomington typically offers. But notably, there's also significant opportunity for lesser skilled workers too, which is also important. Which brings us to this evening's tax abatement consideration. As you know, there are two elements to our recommendation. The first and significantly smaller portion is the tax abatement related to Catalent's proposed investment in real property, a total of $10 million. We are proposing a 10-year, 50% abatement on this investment, which means Catalent will both save and pay an estimated $83,000 per year in taxes. Over 10 years, the net present value of that is approximately $638,000. And I've listed the 20-year view because this is in the context of a corresponding 20-year personal property abatement. You'll note they'll be paying 100% in real property taxes for years 11 to 20 for a 20-year net present value of $1.4 million. The structure is typical of what we've done in the past. Cutting over to personal property abatement, this is where things get interesting. It's interesting because of the scale of the investment, which is $340 million, and also interesting because we're proposing a 20-year abatement, which is new for Bloomington and a tool only made available in Indiana since early 2014. We're proposing a 20-year, 90% abatement on this investment with an annual value of approximately $2.1 million per year and a net present value of roughly $28.5 million over the 20-year abatement period. A lot of assumptions go into the $28 million figure, so this is just an estimate based on our analysis. You'll note the net present value of the abatement from years 11 through 20 is approximately $9 million, or roughly 31% of the total value. I should add, and as you may know, the state legislature has flirted for some time with the idea of lowering and even eliminating personal property taxes in Indiana. Past efforts failed, and this year's effort appears to be deferred to the next budget session. It's worth recognizing that this question may very likely come up again. And to be clear, if a state law were to pass, the floor on depreciable property could drop or disappear, and the effect could be to reduce our local personal property tax revenues and thus the value of this abatement. The certainty surrounding the legislation, or I should say the uncertainty surrounding the legislation, translates into a lack of predictability for any company, including Catalent, who's seeking to make a significant personal property capital investment. The secondary effect of our abatement, therefore, is to help provide some predictability at this point in Catalent's decision-making process. On the other side of the ledger are the jobs benefits. These include, most importantly, the opportunities the current and new jobs represent for people in Bloomington and the surrounding area, and the broader economic benefits of job growth across the community. And it's certainly also important to understand the tax revenues these jobs represent to support our quality of life and other public investments. On the jobs front, you'll see that Catalent reports 3,212 jobs at the facility, to which they would add a minimum of another 1,000 direct jobs, meaning jobs at the facility, with this incremental investment. You'll recall earlier that I mentioned that 1,200 jobs lost at the Thompson closure was estimated to represent 2,350 jobs in the community. In the same way here, an additional 1,000 jobs represents 2,230 jobs in the community, according to an updated impact report using the MC economic analysis tool. And you'll see here, when you apply the same ratio of employees living within Monroe County that the company currently reports, 52% living within Monroe County, you'll see in addition to the current $17.5 million net present value of county optional income tax, the new direct jobs will spin off $5.8 million in COIT, and the total COIT impact will be $10.5 million according to the wage multiplier of the MC model, which estimates the indirect wages to be lower than the direct wages. So as I wrap up, let me address a couple of questions we've had in the building of the recommendation before you today. Some council members have also raised these in work sessions and other discussions. First off, why 20 years for the personal property abatement? Catalent indicated significant concern with tax liabilities in years 11 onward. Its equipment will have long-term taxable value, absent any state actions, and they would maintain long-term production of the facility. We structured a recommendation to recognize and overcome that concern. Second, is the growth sustainable past the heightened activities surrounding vaccine production? As Catalent noted, and you'll see if you read through their investor guidance, they're continuing to see significant growth across product lines, and one has to assume the company would not make the scale of investment if there were any concerns about long-term growth. Third, can we support the workforce? As Bloomington and the surrounding region continues to grow, we believe we can continue to provide the necessary workforce and skills this kind of expansion would require, both from within Bloomington and from the surrounding region. Catalent has recruited successfully to quadruple its workforce since its arrival at all skill levels, and we believe we can meet this 30% increase in their workforce, especially in the context of the city's and the state's focus on workforce development and attraction efforts. Put simply, given the choice, I'd rather tackle the challenge of growth than the challenge of decline. How will this affect our housing market? As I noted earlier, and as we all know, housing affordability is a significant issue in Bloomington and around the country, and a major priority for this administration. We feel that the proximity of the adjacent Hopewell Hospital site development, which projects between 600 and 1,000 residential units, and other housing potential in the southwest portion of town, in addition to the continued growth and densification of housing, will help absorb housing growth needed from this job growth. Housing is certainly a challenge, but in our view, not a reason to reject the positive economic impacts of this potential investment. And finally, how can Catalent become more engaged in the community? While we understand that the pharmaceutical industry can sometimes be introverted, and Catalent has certainly had its hands full here in Bloomington since its arrival, we're confident there's an opportunity to integrate the company more into the community. We've been impressed with Andrew and his team's engagement with us in recent months, including their interest in our TDM efforts. We appreciate the company's focus on sustainability and diversity, and that alignment with our values and community. We feel there's a strong foundation to expand that engagement in the months and years ahead. With all that in mind, the administration asks Council to support the ERA designation and abatement recommendation before you today. We can build on an extraordinary turnaround story for this former Thompson site. We can position Bloomington and the region for significant direct and indirect benefits from the investment. And we can do so with an incentive structure that minimizes our risk while allowing us to monitor the rewards that would come from this rare growth opportunity. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crowley. Now we turn to Council for any questions about all the information that's just been provided to us. I see Councilmember Rallo's hand up.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Very informative, and thank you, Mr. Crowley, for speaking to all of the council members prior to this meeting, answering our questions. I was wondering about temporally the time window to scale up. In other words, adding 1,000 jobs and I think my major concern is the effect on housing market. What are we anticipating in terms of the time required to scale up if this investment were to happen in our community?
I can take that, Councilman Rallo. We're looking to scale up immediately. We're building the plans, the hiring plans, the staffing plans, and the preparations to do so. We feel within the next 6 to 12 months that we would be able to achieve that very ambitious goal. And it is an ambitious goal to grow that much, to be quite honest with you. But the opportunities are here for us here in Bloomington. We feel very confident that our outreach programs that our human resources group has put together to reach out to the community, our partnerships with Hoosier Hills, Ivy Tech will help us do the proper training for potential colleagues to join us. reaching out to the different universities in the area, the uses of our ERGs that I spoke about, to reach out to the communities to help bring in new colleagues to the site. We're putting a very aggressive plan in place to do so. And we feel very confident that we will be very successful in that effort.
Thank you, Mr. Espejo. That's a very short period of time.
It is.
Surprises me. Madam Chair, I have other questions, but I can wait.
Let me see if there are other council questions first, and then we can certainly come back to several rounds. Councilmember Volan, followed by Councilmember Scambalori.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Most of my questions are going to be based on something similar to what Councilmember Rallo said. I'm particularly concerned about the impact of this on the local housing supply. So the first question I'd like to ask, and I know there'll be rounds for other opportunities, but I understand that Catalent is interested in our TDM efforts. I actually haven't met the TDM director yet for the city, but I'd like to know specifically what has ESD and Catalent discussed with respect to managing the demand for transportation to this, which is essentially a commute from a metropolitan area wide sense. What do you say, Mr. Crowley?
Yeah, so we really appreciate Andrew and Grant and their team's interest, their HR director as well. So what we've talked to them about is we are in the process of building up. We've just branded and will put a marketing and software platform in place to really activate the TDM process. As I think all of you know, getting corporate and other organizational buy-in is going to be critical to the success of the program. And so what we're looking for from Catalent, and we've had discussions with them about, is the ability to have strong enrollment from their employee base, and to do so using internal marketing and other ways to reach their employees. Also to look for ways that maybe Catalent can be a leader in helping us promote this across the city. So to be a corporate leader that could signal to other companies and organizations the importance of this. The nice thing about TDM is that it can be pretty adaptive to certain commuting behaviors. So for example, I mentioned that about 52% of the employee base currently lives within Monroe County. That means 48% does not. And so if you have groups of people coming from Bedford, or if you have groups of people coming from Spencer or some other location, TDM allows for the organization of those groups into a more efficient commuting behavior. So what it's beneficial to the employee, it's beneficial to the company, certainly would help the TDM effort get activated aggressively and faster. And so, what we're looking from Catalent is really support to really engage with their employee base to take advantage of this.
Okay, could you be a little bit more specific as to exactly how you're going to incentivize employees to reduce their vehicle miles traveled?
Sure. Let's say there are 15 employees, 12 employees coming from Bedford every day on the same shift, right? Without a sense of organizational or other mechanism to get together. Maybe some of them are carpooling, but they're probably driving alone. So a van pool is a great solution for that, where they can get organized through the TDM platform. Then they can organize a van pool and they can basically commute together. So you've essentially reduced whatever number of cars that would otherwise be associated with a single occupancy vehicle travel.
Oh, I mean, this is not the behavior that I'm used to seeing from, for example, county employees who, until we implemented meters, always wanted to have their car as close as possible, to have the flexibility and the independence to go whenever they wanted to. Is there going to be a parking cash out program where everyone is charged for their parking space, but if they, but then they get a raise equal to the amount that's being charged for parking? But then if they choose to go in the van pool, they make a little bit of extra money because they're no longer having to, they get to keep the money that they would have spent on the parking space at Catalent. Is that a program on the table?
It's certainly open for discussion on that. We have not addressed that specifically with Catalent, but I mean, you know, as you know, we're looking at that at the city, and certainly that's a possibility. I think for us, it's really to try to minimize whatever mechanism you know that makes sense to minimize that single occupancy vehicle travel. And there are a lot of, you know, the importance of having an engaged employer organization that is supporting its employees and making that kind of decision is critical to the success of TDM. So that's really where our discussions have started, and they've just started.
Okay, well, so but the answer briefly, just to make sure I have it right, the answer briefly is that that is not a plan that has been considered.
Yeah, it's not one that's been I mean, we're considering obviously, but it's not one that's being discussed, that has been discussed to date. But you know, okay. I think Andrew and I can talk about it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Scambolori.
Yes, thank you. My questions will likely span a couple different rounds too here, but let's start. Mr. Crowley, could you put up the slide with the personal property abatement with the 28 million figure?
Yeah.
I'll get to it.
Does this? So.
No, this is great. And I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with this presentation for someone.
Essentially, you mentioned.
Is it this one, Sue?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
On the 20-year estimated net present value, 28,426 or 462. You commented that there are a number of assumptions that go into actually producing that number. Could you speak more about that and what kind of assumptions you brought in?
Sure. So there are a couple of different factors that come into play. One is the tax rate, which, you know, we, for the purpose of the analysis, have kept flat, but as you know, that changes year over year. So it's not material necessarily, but it will have some effect on that number. There's I mentioned the possibility of state action. So there's, you know, we are assuming no state action, which you know, may or may not be right, but we're basically saying that the floor, and maybe I should explain how personal property abatement actually works, just to make it so people understand. So if you have $1 million of personal property equipment that you're buying, the first thing that happens is the assessed value of that equipment is netted down, and it hits a depreciation schedule for the first handful of years. And that depreciation schedule, you know, bumps up, bumps down, starts making its way down, and then hits a floor. And then the floor becomes the flat depreciation factor that's placed against the gross value of the equipment that generates the net assessed value against which the tax rate is calculated. So if that makes sense, $1 million, let's just make math easier, $1 million becomes $300,000 because there's a 30% floor eventually, and that $300,000 is what is applied against the tax rate to generate the tax revenue against that equipment. So there are a lot of assumptions. You know, it's not uncommon sometimes for new equipment coming in where there's a lot of existing equipment hits the floor immediately, right? So we haven't assumed that. We assume that all of the equipment will go through the natural depreciation schedule, which is which is a higher number. We're making a conservative assumption, so the value is higher than if it were to go straight to the floor. We're also not assuming any kind of drop in the floor or any change in legislation that would eliminate the floor outright or anything like that. So this is to some degree probably the highest, you know, value of the abatement that we would consider, and then some of those steps can decrease it significantly. So, for example, I ran some analyses to say, well, what happens if the floor drops to 15%, right? And the equipment comes in and immediately hits 15%. What does that look like? That's actually about $11 million, right? So it has a significant impact on the overall value of the abatement we put on the table. So anyway, those are the kind of assumptions we put in here. And, you know, it's an estimate.
Okay. So it's essentially the nature of the instrumentation itself and what it's used for, and the nature of the tax climate that we may be in the coming years. So
that's right.
Am I understanding that? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. I have some other questions, but I'll hold them for now. And Ms. Smith, if you could unshare.
Thank you very much. So I can see hands from council members who may have questions. I see Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, thank you. And thanks all for presentation and all your work on this. I had a question about the slide about the county option income tax. You could pull it up, Ms. Cooper Smith, if you wanted to, but it's probably okay. If not, also I took a screen grab. That figure about the new direct from the 1,000 employees, that's county-wide figure, is that right? And based on 52% of Catalan employees being located in Monroe County?
Yes, that's right. All of these, it's because it's the county income tax. I basically was using the county totals for this.
Did my internet freeze for a moment?
It did.
Oh.
You're back.
Did
Thank
you hear?
you. I didn't hear a response, but did you hear my question?
Yeah, I heard your question. So yeah, because we were looking countywide on this because it was the county income tax. We would certainly want to drop this, in terms of, we're making the assumption on COIT at the 52% level, but the overall job numbers are the total.
Okay, thank you. And then remind me what the city's portion or percentage of that would be from the county-wide. I think that rate is something like 1.35 local and county-wide, but we have the city is a taxing. Is that right?
Yeah, you're breaking in and out, but that's about right. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, I may need to follow up in writing, but thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there additional council questions? Councilmember Rosenbarger.
I thank you all for the presentations. A lot of work has gone into this for sure. I think I share concerns about the housing market here in Bloomington, Monroe County, the region. I think there was a comment that densification is happening in Bloomington, but our UDO basically has frozen our core neighborhoods. And I mean, 15 duplexes a year isn't going to really add to densification in our most sought after neighborhoods across the city. So I think it's just like a little confusing for me. Hopewell is happening, but that's already kind of been talked about as, part of the 1,000 units we need a year before this is even happening. So it's another potential 1,000. I don't know. I guess I'm just looking for discussion around the housing crisis because it's just a lot of folks, right, needing homes, not being able to pay, and just kind of echoing some concerns from the UDO talks back in the day. What about our road infrastructure? What about parking, traffic, plumbing? It's just a lot, I guess. So this is a kind of an in general question, but I just feel like it is a concern that people here already don't have places to live. And is there any discussion about looking at the UDO again if we're bringing in another 1,000 people and actually finding places to put them that's not on the outskirts or, in apartments?
Yeah, so let me clarify a couple things. When I was talking about densification, I wasn't saying the onesie, twosie duplexes in the core neighborhoods. There are some substantial new housing complexes that are going up. They're student focused, they're near the university, but they're actually drawing people out of other locations, right? So when you have a large complex going in for students, those students lived somewhere else before, right? I mean, or the number of students lived somewhere else before. And so, there's a positive effect to the rest of the housing situation, even if you're isolating, that growth to the student population. So, I mean, we are seeing a lot of complexes going in. We're seeing new units come on. We are not, to your point, we are behind, and we have been behind for a while. But we are working aggressively to try to catch up on those numbers, as was detailed out in the housing study. I think what we have to understand here is that yes, there is an opportunity for us to be rethinking the UDO. In fact, planning is looking at certain things in that is more directly tied to things like affordable housing, to see if we can actually tweak some of the elements of the UDO to try to improve the outcomes of affordable housing relative to what we're seeing in this first period of the UDO. So some of that stuff is already being considered, looked at, and I think in fact is being staged for public review. So, the housing situation is certainly an issue that we were looking at, are considering. But, again, this is a long play. This is not a kind of, snap issue. We really want to continue the growth, the economic growth, and the benefits that we've seen spinning off the site and throughout the community from the kind of long-term investments that we're willing to make to advance the community. And while there may be some challenges right now in terms of housing, not only in Bloomington, but around the country, in our opinion, as I said earlier, that's not something that that we think should get in the way of really driving as much of this economic benefit as we can.
Thank you. Yeah, I know it's one challenge. Just one quick follow-up. I thought that this turnaround was pretty quick. That did I miss that? I thought the turnaround to get these new jobs in place was just not that far off into the future.
So if I may interrupt, I apologize. We are really excited, and with your support, we want to get right to work here. We do want to add the headcount this year. However, the specific timing of those growth opportunities continues to shape with our strategic planning. The growth at the site is based on that strategic planning, and our commitment is to add these jobs and grow the site over the next several years. 5 years is our vision there, but we do want to get started now because we know there's a lot to do. So I didn't mean to think that we're going to do all this expansion in 1 year. My apologies there. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you. That is helpful. So 5 years for the 1,000 jobs.
Yes. And again, that's based on the strategic processes that we have in place. So look at the Bloomington site versus other sites, the expansion opportunities that we have here. These are all put into that strategic planning vision for us.
I could also add, that one of the benefits of this kind of attention and growth is, it certainly does attract attention from development too, right? So, it's that we've had very low vacancy rates, as I sort of showed you in that chart. But this kind of attention and this kind of growth in a community does attract housing developers, and may accelerate what would otherwise, perhaps take longer.
Thank you. Any other first round questions before we go back to some others? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, thank you.
Unmute.
Yeah. No, I was trying to find the right button. So I have a very broad question. And I've exchanged some emails with Mr. Crowley about this. And that is how to interpret the value of the real estate and the business personal property abatements, which is given as $29.1 million. How can we interpret that? That's not that the city is actually would actually make $29 million more if we don't give this abatement, right? How can we interpret that?
Yeah, and thank you for that question, Councilmember Piedmont Smith. So I think everybody knows this. Maybe for the purposes of the public, it's important to understand. So the way it works simply, and I'll probably oversimplify it, is that a city will receive what's called the levy, and the levy is essentially what it needs to cover its expenses. And that levy is calculated it's a complicated formula, but largely is based on what, the last year's levy was, and then a little bit more and some other formulaic, so you end up, so let's say that for round numbers, the levy for us is $35 million. So that levy is what it is. It has nothing to do with assessed value, property taxes, any of that. It is what it is. It gets set as the first step. The next thing that happens is the assessed value is all calculated, and then you have the assessed value, and then that's where the tax rate gets calculated. So they're solving to some degree for the levy by using the tax rate as a mathematical formula to get to that levy. So very oversimplified way of describing it, but that's the situation. So the levy is what it is. If hypothetically, there were no abatement, and all of this assessed value would flow into the assessed value of the community, because of that formulaic approach to how it's set, the tax rate might go down a little bit. Now, it's really negligible because when you look at the assessed value for the city of Bloomington, that number, doing this off the top of my head, is something like $4.5 billion, right? So then this, as a percentage of that larger amount, is not a huge number. I mean, it's a huge investment for us, but given all of the assessed value, baseline assessed value, you get a sense of how proportionately, what kind of effect it would have. Does that make sense?
So the investment, the $350 million investment, if none of it were abated, we could imagine that the tax rate would go down if we had the same levy. Is that right?
Yeah. So first thing, as I was saying earlier, the first thing that happens is the 340 of personal property and the 10 of real property. The 340 would be netted down by that depreciation schedule, what I was describing before. So it ends up being about a third of that amount. So it's down to like 110 or whatever for the assessed value against which the tax rate would be calculated. And so that number as a proportion of the whole is going to have some effect, slight effect on the tax rate, but again, it's very, very small.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other first round questions before we move on to the second round? And I'm not seeing any hands go up from Councilmember Smith or Councilmember Sims. So second round. Councilmember Scambolori.
Yes, thank you. This question is directed to Mr. Crowley. Mr. Crowley, one of the things we're being asked as council to sign off on is that this project won't negatively impact the TIF district's ability to meet its data allocations. Could you comment in more detail on how this project will impact the consolidated TIF?
So yes, thank you for the question, Councilmember Scambolori. So TIF districts in Bloomington only capture real property. They do not capture personal property. In order for a TIF district to capture personal property, a taxpayer would have to be designated by the Redevelopment Commission in order for that to flow into the TIF. We do not do that. We don't have that here. So there will be a slight effect, the $10 million, which would, without an abatement, that tax revenue would flow into the TIF. But really the mother load of this, 97% of the investment, would not be eligible for TIF to begin with.
And so you can confirm that our ability to meet our debt obligations wouldn't be compromised by this project?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you. Second round, I see Councilmember Rallo's hand up, followed by Councilmember Boland.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is, anticipating or estimating how many of the new positions would be filled locally? Locally meaning within the county or within the proximate counties around Monroe County? Are we looking at for the required skills that are needed? Would it be a majority of the jobs would be filled by local residents?
So if I could take that. So currently 52% of our current colleagues reside within the Monroe County area. So I would not expect that to change dramatically over the next several years as we look to grow our operations and our headcount.
I see. Okay, so similar to your current employment
demographics.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councilmember Volin.
Yes, following up on that. So, okay, Catalent, only half the employees live in the county. The other half are from out of county. I guess I don't understand why the city should be solely responsible for abating all the personal property tax when half of that benefit is going to go to other counties. I mean, why aren't we getting help from other counties? I'm not sure who to direct the question to, Mr. Crowley.
Well, I may call in Larry Allen on this one, but I mean, certainly I think the first and simplest answer is that it's our jurisdiction, right? So a county, another county would not have the ability to actually provide an abatement in our footprint. So Larry, I don't know if you want to kind of jump in and help explain.
Yeah, well, I would just say there's no mechanism right now under the abatement code to work out, there's no shared jurisdiction for this kind of project currently. I do know that the General Assembly is considering more of a statewide jurisdiction for the IEDC, but that's not something that's currently in place.
Okay.
In terms of whether we share responsibility, that would take negotiation and interlocal agreements. I think the one thing I would point out, Councilmember Volin, also is, this obviously goes into shared sectors. So we are an economic region, we don't exist in an isolated county alone. And so there is mutual support in developing these types of industries that are complementary to each other.
I mean, I understand that. I appreciate the niceties of state statute here, but the bottom line is still the whole logic behind giving an abatement is that it would create jobs that would then generate income taxes. So if us giving them, say, $30 million to bring in 1,000 new jobs, half of which won't pay income taxes in the county, why does that make sense? Why don't we give them half as much and give them incentives to get more of their employees to locate, to buy a house in Monroe County?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I sort of keying off what Larry was saying about, we are a regional economy, right? And you can get tied up pretty fast in, hey, you over there, you need to make me whole because of what's happening over here, right? I mean, I'll give you an example. We have thousands of people who choose to live in Bloomington who work at Crane. And that's a reality. People are moving around. People decide to live in one place for a number of different reasons, and they decide to work in a different place. And I think if we were to try to come up with some sort of, web of agreements between jurisdictions and to try to accommodate that kind of pattern, I think it becomes unmanageable very quickly. I think what we have to understand is we are a regional economy. People move around. Sometimes people are going to work here and live somewhere else, and sometimes they're going to work somewhere else and live here. And it's just the nature of how our economy is set up.
I mean, I get that, Mr. Crowley, but you're still asking us to forego $1.5 million a year in taxes that will pay for the very resources that Catalent needs for its employees to get to them. The roads in the city, the infrastructure that we're providing. I mean, there's a reason for the taxes. They're put to this kind of use. And so the fact that people move around doesn't really help me as a Bloomington City Council member worried about Bloomington's budget, that we're giving away half of this money is going directly into the coffers of other jurisdictions. Why should we give them more than half of the money that, I mean, again, this is you're asking us to subsidize the very jurisdictions where, I just don't understand how you can, maybe that's just a comment. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional second round questions from council members? I see Councilmember Flaherty and Councilmember Piedmont Smith next.
Thank you. I'll hope for better luck on my connectivity. I was interested in following up on the point that I think Councilmember Piedmont Smith was making about what actually happens when the taxes are abated. So you started to explain, Mr. Crowley, that we have a levy which is set independently of assessed value. And when we divide that to get the tax rate, we can see incrementally higher rates for other taxpayers, essentially, as a result of the abatement. But the question I think I'm most interested in, beyond like the shift of tax burden among payers, is what is the impact on potential lost revenue, in particular from the potential of running into tax caps and having credits for that reason. Like, I don't know, I haven't seen that reported anywhere in the materials. Like, what is the expected or best estimate lost revenue to the city as a result of the abatement, as opposed to simply the net present value of the abatement itself? Does that question make sense?
It makes
Have you
sense.
made that estimate?
Yeah, let me see if I can answer it this way, and this may not be satisfying to you, but let me try. If you look at Bloomington and you compare us with, for example, a Muncie, and I think I may have emailed about this to Councilmember Piedmont Smith. In a situation like, and I'm choosing Muncie, I think that's right, but communities that have had a kind of reduction in their assessed value, right, but their expenses stay the same, then what happens is the tax rate goes up. When the tax rate goes up, that's where you start to hit those caps and those circuit breakers, right? So that's where you see real loss, because what's happening is you should be collecting that money above the caps and you're not collecting. That's a real loss, right? What we have is actually a really pretty positive situation in terms of caps. We're brushing up against them, but it's not something like a Muncie, and I hate to pick a Muncie, but there are other communities where it's a much more acute problem. We actually have a pretty favorable situation here. And so, the reality is, when you talk about loss of a loss of revenue, right, then the loss is not tied to the levy, right? You don't have less money for expenses. The loss would be, as you say, kind of triggered by tax rates going up that would then start to go past that cap. Does that make sense? And so
yes,
we don't think materially this is going to have a material effect on it, basically, because of we're gaining assessed value, we're not losing it, right? And so the effect is not going to be that significant.
So I guess, there's not a hard number of potential loss or assumed lost revenue as a result of an increase in tax cap credits as a result of folks bumping into that more frequently. The folks who are near the margin, near the cap now, for instance. So we don't have a hard number, but your takeaway is, and what we should take away is that, we're not losing 1.5 million a year in revenues. That 1.5 million a year in tax that we won't be collecting from Catalent gets shifted to other taxpayers, spread throughout the city for the most part, and there won't be much lost revenue to the city as a taxing unit. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be, it's sort of right, because there's a lot of movement in the baseline assessed value, right? So that baseline kind of grows naturally, right? So it's not like all of that is fixed, and this is the only decision point that's having an effect on stuff. So there are a lot of effects on what would hit the tax rate, but broadly speaking, I think generally right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I wanted to ask what the value of the previous city incentives for Catalent is.
Well, so we had a tax abatement in 2019, and it was a different structure. The capital investment was different. The actual schedule for the abatement was different. If that was a $125 million capital investment, split 40 and 85 real estate and personal property. The schedule was a different schedule. It was in both cases a 10-year schedule, decreasing from 100 to 0 eventually. So it's a slightly different schedule. What we did do is we were interested in looking at the value of the net present value of the abatement as divided by different factors like jobs, right? So we took a look at the cumulative net present value of the abatement and said, how does that stack up from a jobs perspective? And if you do the math on the 2019 abatement, that was about $31,000 a job. This is actually 29. So it seems like a really big number. It's actually less, even though the schedule, things are different. The capital investment's different. The tax rate we were using at the time was different, and the schedule of the abatement is different. It's actually slightly less than the previous abatement on a per job basis.
So can you give me the total abatement in 2019? I don't remember how many jobs. So
the total capital investment was 125 million. The cumulative net present value of the abatement, so between both real and personal property, was 6.2 million. And then there were 200 jobs committed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there additional second round questions from council? Second round, I'm not seeing a hand. I did not go in the first round. I have a question. This is probably for Mr. Crowley. We have in our community a little bit of an employee shortage, correct? A lot of our small businesses and retail and restaurants are struggling for employees. Do you have a general sense as to how this may impact other of our major contributors to our economic development strategies here in Bloomington? And this might have something to do too with concerns about where are these employees going to come from, and certainly a regional approach as well as here in Bloomington. But any comment about what you're hearing maybe from other people in the business community?
Well, it's not just a Bloomington problem, right? The Great Resignation, I think, is an official term that is now being talked about, and I think it's just a pandemic-related issue that is very real, and it is stressing businesses of all sizes, and certainly our small businesses, are stressed coming through the pandemic, and we're hearing challenges out there. We're hearing employee challenges. We're hearing cost challenges. There are a lot of things that are kind of layering on right now that makes it pretty tough, right, to be a particularly small business and a restaurant and something like that in Bloomington. So yes, we're hearing that. Yes, we understand that that's happening, and I think that what we expect and hope to see here is, with this kind of progressive growth that's happening among some of these industries, the residual value, I mentioned the multiplier effect of across this kind of the spectrum, once you have kind of direct jobs and direct investment and how that multiplies out, that benefits, that creates revenue for businesses serving, the new jobs, et cetera. And we see that, that kind of growing together, right? Well, it's kind of a tough time right now. And I think it's difficult to make decisions based on this moment in time because it's sort of not typical. But as time goes on, and as these, hopefully we get out of this and the thing progresses together, we have growth happening at Catalent, hopefully, and we have, the community kind of growing alongside it, that we see a sort of symbiotic growth pattern managing through this problem right now.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I see Councilmember Smith's hand up.
Thank you. I just think this is a fantastic opportunity. And one of the things that I thought I would ask Alex that maybe illustrate part of how I think about it is, so if there's, and if I go off the rails on this, Alex, please, Mr. Crowley, please let me know. So if there's approximately 1,000 new jobs created and 52% of them are likely to be local people, and they earn approximately $60,000 a year, it appears that that's somewhere about $30 million a year into our local economy. Now, did I multiply that right, or?
Yeah, I mean, yes, you did. The math is broadly right. It's closer to about 33 million payroll. I mean, you're talking about the payroll and the effective payroll.
Right. Yeah. So what a fantastic influx of income and funds into our local economy for our city. And it just, so if I'm correct in that, it just seems like a fantastic opportunity, and we should be doing everything we can to convince Catalent to make this investment. Am I right in that, Mr. Crowley?
Yes, well, I mean, I agree with you. I think this is, I mean, this is a significant benefit. And again, you know, I think it is a moment in time, and it's certainly an investment that the company is making right now. But as we've seen from, you know, the history of this site and other examples around Bloomington, and, you know, this is part of a positive growth curve that we want to see in Bloomington. That's going to take years and years of work. And, you know, and we're starting to see the benefits of, I was showing those charts on wages, starting to see the benefits of some of the stuff that we've been doing taking hold. And we absolutely want to try to drive that forward and continue that kind of trajectory.
Yeah, well, the people that remember when RCA left, and I grew up in Northwest Indiana when steel mills closed, and the opportunity to attract and enhance such an excellent company to come and bring high wage jobs. I'm all for it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any additional second round questions? Anyone who has not spoken yet or had a question yet? And seeing none, if we want to go to a third round, I did see Councilmember Volan's hand up, and then Councilmember Rollo and Councilmember Scambolari. Mr.
Thank
Volan.
you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Right. Okay. So this is a complicated question, but I need to start by asking the Catalent representatives, how much land in this new development is being devoted to parking in acres? How many spaces are you building? Maybe we should ask it that way.
Yes, sir. I can answer that question. The southeast, the former IMI parcel is the only portion of the Bloomington campus that is intended to be parking. And as we've laid out our initial concepts for this parking, we anticipated to cover close to 550 parking spaces for the site.
Okay, so you're adding 550 spaces with the expansion, but you're anticipating 1,000 new employees.
Yes.
How do you square that?
Yes, so we are a 24/7 operation and are well balanced across the shifts. So certainly there's a portion of our staff that is not working in a lab or on a production line. It's a smaller portion that would be primarily on first shift, but the rest of the operation, those that are supporting the drug substance operation, formulating the product, filling the product, testing product in the lab, our maintenance teams on the equipment, on the facility. We are 24/7 across the board to ensure that the operation stays up and running to keep the product safe in meeting its specification.
Okay, so here's the big question. Has Catalent would they consider devoting, let's say, a significant portion, say 1/5 of the land that you would have devoted to parking, to putting housing on top of it? In other words, without necessarily being a developer yourselves, you would contract with a developer to build housing on your parking instead of parking, and then make sure that it only goes to Catalent employees so that they reduce the need to commute and you can reduce your carbon footprint. Would you be willing to consider that as a condition of getting this abatement? Again, you don't have to buy the housing. You just have to agree to let somebody develop on the land, but you and everyone else benefits from it. What would you say?
We can definitely take that back to our strategic planning teams. That is all part of the process for looking at how we expand the business throughout Catalent. That's something we can take back to the strategic planning teams and assess the impacts that would have.
So just to be clear, I dislike parking more than I dislike giving up city tax revenue. If we can be put to a better use. And this is, if you guys are a 24/7 operation, even a nominal amount of housing directly across from the plant is going to benefit you and your employees. So yeah, if we can talk about that, I'd like to add that discussion between now and the confirming resolution. Thank you.
If I may jump in, if it's okay. I mean, Councilmember Volin, I understand what you're saying. I understand the value of doing that. I think reasonably, practically speaking, this is a multinational global corporation, and what you're asking for is a decision to become involved in a housing development within 10 days of this meeting. I think that probably, practically speaking, is not a reasonable expectation. I think we would like to and will work cooperatively and we'll have discussions with Catalan about opportunities. We think there's a tremendous opportunity for workforce housing in the vicinity of the facility.
Mr. Crowley, excuse me just a second. You're asking this body to forego $30 million in tax revenue. And you're saying to me that it's unreasonable to even float the idea when I have not been involved in the development of this agreement. And I think that what I'm asking is a very reasonable thing. If you want my vote, that is. But I mean, I find it a little off-putting that you would suggest that it's not even worth suggesting.
No, I'm not saying that. I think for number one, we're not foregoing the revenue, but more importantly, that the expectation, I think you were saying, as a condition of the tax abatement, they would agree to do this. Yes. I think what I'm raising is the confirmatory resolution is coming up on March 2nd. I think what we could certainly do is have discussions, commit to having discussions with Catalan and exploring ways in which they can perhaps help the community develop, be involved in developing workforce housing in some form. And I think that that's absolutely a reasonable thing. And in fact, there are opportunities for land development nearby, and we think that lends itself well to what they're trying to accomplish.
So let me get this straight. Catalan is more interested in discussing this than the city is, because their answer was quite adequate.
Well,
you're telling me that you don't want to make them commit to anything.
I think, I will let Andrew speak for himself.
Yes. Let me be clear. We have a strategic assessment process for all growth expansions. This will have to be, this would need to be an input into that strategic planning process. Mm-hmm. Okay. I compete with other sites for growth opportunities.
I mean, all I was asking was, would Catalan be willing to consider it? And you said you would. I mean, I didn't ask you for a commitment. That might be my condition for voting for it, but I thought your answer was quite adequate.
We would assess this in our strategic planning process and what impact this has on where Catalan will invest.
Okay, thank you.
Let's move on now to Councilmember Rollo, followed by Councilmember Scambalori. Are there any other councilmember, and then Councilmember Flaherty in our third round?
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Espejo or Mr. Eccles, I know there are many things to consider for Catalan in making an investment of this magnitude. And I'm wondering about any challenges that you see in terms of infrastructure, either on site or in the community, that we should be made aware of.
Grant, you want to grab that from an infrastructure?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yes, Councilmember Rollo. I'm not currently aware of any specific infrastructure challenges. I mean, we're well supplied on the electrical front. The City of Bloomington Utilities has been a great partner as we've brought in additional expansions into the facility. And at this time, I'm not aware of any that would prohibit us from as a roadblock for this potential investment.
Good to hear. Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Councilmember Scambalori.
Yes, thank you. I have a quick question for Mr. Allen, if he could pop back in. Thank you. Question, the abatement we're talking about is for 20 years, but the ERA designation could conceivably run for 30. I'm sure there's some statutory reason for that distinction, but could you help me understand that?
Yeah, it puts in a little bit of padding. So it anticipates a 5-year investment window to begin with, and then a 5-year padding window. You would need the ERA to conceivably last throughout the longest possible period of time that they could claim that abatement. So because it's a 20-year abatement, we wanted to extend out that ERA period so that if they start claiming it early. Now, of course, and we've mentioned this before, but I think it's useful to point out, council every year gets to assess the performance. Once they start claiming this abatement, council every year gets to assess the performance of Catalent and how they're measuring up to the stated goals. And then specifically with the personal property abatement that goes to 20 years, at the end of year 10 or after year 10, council is required to hold a public hearing on the status of that abatement and reconsider what the abatement was versus the deliverables from the company.
Got it. Thank you. And I have a broader question for our colleagues at Catalent, but I can wait till round 4 if that's preferred.
Thank you. And I don't know if we'll get to a round 4, but we'll see. Councilmember Flaherty.
Thank you. I was curious about the amount of annual taxable corporate income for Catalent in a typical year, and also the expected incremental growth in that annual taxable income. So approximately what it is now and approximately what you expect it to be after the full investment and growth in employment is realized. If you don't have those figures offhand, it's something we could follow up about, but I was curious about that. So business income tax, corporate income tax.
Yeah, I don't have that available at this time, but I can see what I can do to get that.
I guess I'll follow up with why this is relevant to me. I guess in thinking about the appropriateness of tax abatements, a lot has been. I feel like the logical argument has sort of been of the presentation is that Catalent is a great employer and pays good wages, and we want all the things that you are doing in Bloomington, of course, and would love for that to expand and grow. Therefore, we should grant this abatement. But there's sort of this missing step of, is the abatement needed? Like, but for the abatement, would the expansion happen? That we're kind of trying to wrestle with, because of course we shouldn't be in the habit of granting abatements that aren't actually strictly necessary for a project to proceed. And it's been mentioned several times, that Mr. Espejo, as you know, that you're competing as a site manager, and that we're competing with other cities who have tools. But I'm thinking in the overall landscape, the business climate in Indiana is already pretty good due to things like low corporate income tax rates. So like the climate here has already been made very favorable in a way, and to me that means that we should be thinking about what other corporate income tax rates are. For instance, I think ours is 5.5%, and Wisconsin's is 7.9%. That's quite a big difference. I guess the question maybe becomes for Mr. Crowley most centrally, how do we weigh these things, in kind of trying to strike the right balance that Mayor Hamilton said, and in his comments at the beginning of the meeting, that maybe we wish we weren't in a national climate where cities were competing against each other by sort of giving up, potential revenue or maybe seeing some reductions in revenue, but that is the climate we're in. And I guess I'm having a hard time weighing the sort of but-for test of an abatement here, and I'm looking for more input from you, Mr. Crowley, maybe about the overall business landscape in Indiana and why this piece in particular is necessary in an already attractive climate.
Yeah, so I sent you a fairly substantial document that I had been looking at. It's a little hard to do an apples to apples comparison across different states, right? And certainly across different states and also across different municipalities. And there's so many variables. It's kind of hard. We've been looking around. We obviously did our research and looked at other at other locations and maybe what the tax rate might be, and try to figure that out a little bit. In the end, you can, in the end, it's a negotiation. it's negotiation, and the nature of negotiations is you sometimes have a very good idea and sometimes you don't have a great idea of what you're up against, right? What we are trying to do here is we're trying to signal to Catalent that we believe that their growth trajectory that they've already demonstrated, which, if you look back and I quoted a $125 million commitment in one of the charts for the 2019 investment, that they well exceeded that amount. They committed 200 jobs and they added, I think it was like 2,000 jobs, right? Or 2,400 jobs. So, we are certainly very, very pleased with the growth that Catalent has demonstrated since arrival in Bloomington. We want to cultivate that growth. We want to signal that we are a community that wants to see that growth happen. And it's not just because of things that happen at and within Catalent, it's because of all of the benefits that represents across the community for many, many years to come. And so, I think, our position is let's make sure that we are signaling to them, this is important to us. We appreciate this. We see the value of this happening in this community. Leverage everything that we can to try to make this investment happen here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alex and Madam President, if it's appropriate, could I chime in, Alex?
Mr. Everett, I'm not sure I know who this is.
If I may introduce, Jacob Everett is with McGuire Sponsel in Indianapolis.
Would you like to recognize him?
Yeah, if I may.
Sure, thank you.
Sorry to interrupt, just very briefly. I don't know why my camera won't come on, so I apologize for that as well. Yeah, just real briefly. So my name is Jacob Everett with McGuire Sponsel. We are an advisor to Catalent. We work with them across the country. And this is one of the projects that we're helping them consider. And we work with folks like Andrew and Grant, but we also work with their corporate leadership and their tax and strategic departments as well. So just real quickly, in terms of kind of the competitive nature of how the strategies and decisions around these things get made, just to answer Mr. Flaherty's kind of question, maybe to a point a little bit, so they have dozens of facilities across the U.S. and then obviously across the world. And so even just looking at their biologics, division, just one slice of Catalent, we look at places like Wisconsin and Maryland, and even Kansas City and Kansas and Missouri. And these are places, Wisconsin, Maryland specifically, that don't tax manufacturing equipment at all. So again, to your point, Mr. Flaherty, it's the tax climate as a whole is complex, and there's a lot of layers to that. But when we look at something of this scale, where we're talking not about 10 or $20 million of investment, but $350+ million of investment, with almost all of that, really in personal property equipment, that single point of taxation of manufacturing equipment, whether it's taxed or not, is a very, very material data point right within that analysis. So just to put some clarity on kind of how we look at that at the corporate level as we're trying to help advise Catalent on these decisions.
Thank you for that. I'm very anxious to entertain more council questions, but I'm also anxious to get the public comments. So if it's all right with council, unless there are any more third round questions from someone who's not commented in the third round, how about we go to the public, and then certainly when we come back to council, we can offer the opportunity for additional questions. Is that all right with everyone? All right, so public comment, of course, is your opportunity to comment on this particular issue. And I think typically if we're going to have a lot of commenters in the room, we might want to limit the amount of time to 3 minutes, but that will depend on how many hands we see raised. Mr. Lucas, do you have a sense of how many folks are in the queue to make a public comment?
Yes, I see one hand raised at the moment. And for any other folks watching that would like to comment, you can find the raise hand feature in your control bar, either under the reactions button or the more button. And if you're looking for it and can't find it and would like to comment, please send a message via chat to the meeting host and we can recognize you that way. At the moment, I just see one raised hand.
And I hate to limit the time to 3 minutes if there are not going to be that many public comments. So if you have an inkling that you would like to speak, please go ahead and raise your hand now. And okay, seeing 3 now. Are there any more?
That's all I see right now.
All right. Well, let's make it 5 minutes then. And if you'll recognize the first speaker.
First up, I believe, is the BEDC.
Thank you. You may unmute and make your comment.
Good evening. My name is Jen Pearl, and I'm the president of the Bloomington Economic Development Corporation, which serves all of Monroe County. We wanted to thank City Council members for considering this proposal. The BEDC has worked to support Catalent's job growth and investment in the community for the past several years. We appreciate our ongoing collaboration with the city team, and we appreciate Catalent for considering this significant investment in our community, which truly is really great news. The BEDC supports the abatement for 4 main reasons. First, economic development works to create conditions for prosperity for our neighbors, which includes wage growth. This is clearly reflected in Catalent's proposal, starting at 19 an hour and with an average of 32 an hour. The proposed expansion has a much broader economic impact. This adds to the local tax base through Catalent's contributions and income taxes, but this also brings local spending and sales taxes into Monroe County from both Catalent and their employees, whether or not they live in Monroe County. Third, the proposed expansion not only leads to direct jobs, but also indirect jobs through local companies that have been working with Catalent across the region. We have seen this among our local companies. Fourth, this raises our community's profile in life sciences, which is a key industry in our local economy. We've seen our industry shift over the years from furniture making to manufacturing to life sciences. Economic development is about essentially economic gardening. It's about investing to create future-focused jobs. Catalent is a global leader in their field, and they're making a difference for their patients. Beyond these items, we have an opportunity to come together as a community to address some of the questions that have been raised here. This is happening through efforts already, like housing development in the Hopewell neighborhood and neighboring communities, through transit efforts and other community-wide initiatives. But there's still much more we can do by coming together to address the good challenges that come with this. It's a time to come together for our future. For almost 25 years, the city's investments in this parcel have had a significant return for the community. This is an investment that adds to future vitality of the community while growing the overall pie for our economy. Thank you so much for considering this proposal.
Thank you, Ms. Pearl. And next up we have.
Next is Dave Connor.
Thank you. You may unmute and you will have 5 minutes or less.
Well, thank you, President Sandberg, and thank you, council members, for taking this under consideration. My name is Dave Connor. I am the Chief Financial Officer for a local company called Harrell Fish, Inc. Harrell Fish goes by the initials HFI. Maybe that's how you might recognize us. But we're a mechanical construction company here, Bloomington based, for over 35 years. And we're fortunate to have provided service to many of you on this meeting, as well directly to Catalent during this current investments that they've made. What I want to speak to is the indirect impact that their investments are making, especially within our workforce. Over the last year, we've added over 20 well-paying jobs as we provided construction, production support, and ongoing maintenance to Catalent. By well-paying jobs, I'm talking about jobs that are also averaging $30 per hour, union trades jobs plus benefits. So it's making a significant difference in our operations, allowing us to continue our investments in this community. Again, as just mentioned by Ms. Pearl at the BEDC, that's that indirect flow of monies, which I know has been questioned here for quite some time. So again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak in favor of this proposal. Ask you all to support it, encourage your support of it, and think of the greater good that this is going to do for our community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. Next up, we have.
Next is Sarah Rogers.
Thank you. You may unmute and you have 5 minutes or less.
Thank you, Madam President and council members. I encourage you to approve this. The growth of Catalent and the many ways it has affected and continues to impact our community has been significant. Bloomington's growth, powered through companies such as Catalent, has made us a regional hub, not only for medical services and products, but also a highly attractive business destination. Businesses wanting to expand and grow in Bloomington help make us a vibrant, progressive, diverse, and inclusive community, and as such attracts a variety of talent from all over the world. Catalent's growth has provided not only new jobs that helped our community survive and prosper, but it also positively influences many other sectors. Anecdotally, I would like to share an example of retaining, or in this case, reobtaining talent. I have a business lending member or a customer who worked and lived in Bloomington for a number of years, moved out of state for career advancement, and within the last 6 months plus, moved back to Bloomington for another career advancement, this time with Catalent. The ripple effect from new jobs and investments in our community triggers other types of development and investment, such as housing and new business startups. Local shops and restaurants all benefit and prosper from economic development, such as Catalent's continued growth. Economic development is critical to improving the overall quality of our community. It's essential in creating, retaining, and growing jobs within our community. The tax revenues created through economic growth and investment, such as Catalent's expansion, provides the resources critical for services such as police, fire department, parks, rec, senior services, libraries, etc. We all directly benefit from growth such as Catalent's, and most importantly, it helps create a competitive advantage for our community, for those of us who live here now and our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. And who do we have next?
I don't see any additional public comment at the moment.
All right. We will sit tight for just a minute or less. It does not appear that we're going to have any additional public comment. So let us now return to the council. And this time, let's pick up with any questions that we may have. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I wanted to ask about the timing of the confirmatory resolution. If this resolution passes this evening, I understand there will be a public hearing on March 2nd. And is that then the night of the vote on the confirmatory resolution, or can somebody clarify the timeline for me, please?
I want to step on Stephen, so Stephen, if you want to answer it, feel free, but.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it happens the same night. We just have to give the 10-day notice ahead of that meeting that there will be a public hearing. So the public hearing allows for official reservations or remonstrances or objections to the designation of the URA and the abatement, and then the confirmatory resolution is voted on immediately following the public hearing.
Okay, and then as a follow-up, what is that some kind of required timeline, or if the council felt like we needed more time to consider this, would that be possible to push that back?
I don't believe there's a statutory requirement to hold a vote. I think you're required to hold a public hearing and you have to provide notice of that. So the March 2nd meeting would have to at least include that public hearing portion. I think the council could certainly if it wanted to postpone voting, it would have that option. I'm sure the folks here from Catalent would appreciate some clarity, but I think there's that option open to the council under the statute.
Thank you. And Mr. Crowley, can you, or Mr. Espejo, can you speak to your timing, you know, as far as your deadlines?
Sure, I'll take that. We're actively in the strategic planning process. We are well into it, and we are looking to conclude in the very short time frame that strategic planning process. It is a corporate process. I'm not sure the exact deadline, but final submittals were due this week, and they're under review.
And if I can just add, so the reason why we picked that was really to try to get a decision completed early enough in the process to be able to feed into that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Additional questions from council? Councilmember Scambolari, did you still have one? You wanted a fourth round.
Sorry.
No.
Yes, Mr. Espejo and Mr. Eccles, thank you for working with us on all these questions and thinking through them. I'm curious now, based on the conversations you've had with the BDC and with Mr. Crowley's staff, and what you know about Wisconsin and Missouri and Maryland, what are your biggest reservations about Bloomington at this point?
When you say, I'm sorry, oh yeah, I'm off mute. When you say reservations about Bloomington,
what gives you pause about pursuing your project here?
Personally?
Or in your corporate role?
I think, Bloomington is a great place to do continued growth. The opportunities to talent, as you've heard, the opportunities within a vibrant city are all attractions we see for Bloomington. The geographic location, close to major interstates, is extremely helpful. Several years ago, I was with another company in Evansville, Indiana, and the construction of Interstate 69 was extremely beneficial to that area. And it is extremely beneficial to us here in Bloomington. The proximity to the major highways to Indianapolis are positives. The international airport, the freight hub at FedEx is also very helpful. So there are a lot of reasons that for me would be very helpful to make the argument, and that's some of the reasons we're making the argument to grow here in Bloomington, Indiana. Now, my colleagues in the other sites, they are making equal type of arguments for their cities and their locations as well. I'm not very familiar with the Madison area, or the Kansas City area, but they are major hubs as well, and so they are making the commensurate arguments for growth in their sites as well. So it's a very competitive process for us, and obviously the company looks at the greatest advantages to the growth of the company.
And I would expect no less of our friends in Kansas City and Madison.
I am fighting hard.
Yes, well, and I've been to both cities, and I can't imagine why anybody wouldn't want to pursue a project here. But I'm going to put a finer point on my question, and I'm going to nudge just a little more again.
Sure.
Is there an area where you think of Bloomington as being particularly vulnerable? No one else is listening, don't worry.
I have not come across anything that I would say is a particular vulnerability that's special to Bloomington outside of the other locations.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that. Let me think about that.
And you know where to find us all. So,
yes.
But no, thank you for reflecting on that for me. I appreciate it. And
No problem.
I'm out. So
Thank you. Are there any other questions from council? And I'm seeing a hand raised from Councilmember Bolin.
Thank you. This question is to Mr. Crowley. How would you respond to the question that if so if the average new employee will be paid $32 an hour, and the abatement really works out to about $1,500 a year per new employee, that's a correlation. Shouldn't any business in Bloomington that hires somebody at $16 an hour be eligible for the equivalent of a $750 a year tax abatement as well? How do we think about, do we only target abatements to large companies? Shouldn't any, ice cream shop in the downtown area also qualify for this if they hire somebody at $16 an hour? What do you say?
Well, abatement is the abatement in incremental assessed value. So what's being abated is the capital investment of the job. So if an ice cream shop hires someone with no corresponding capital investment, then there is no incremental assessed value to abate.
They're buying a big new ice cream making machine that they need an employee to run. That's the investment.
Yeah, in theory, certainly, if there is a compelling reason, and we would look at it. So there's no bias implicitly in abatements that are limited to very large employers or extraordinarily large capital investments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions at this point from council members before we move on to final comments? I am not seeing any questions, so we will now move into final comments before we conclude the discussion. I'm seeing a hand from Councilmember Rollo.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. And just to follow up on Councilmember Volan's question, I remember granting tax abatements to quite small companies that made capital investment in the community. Just to say, Catalent is a known quantity for us, known quantity for me. It has been a tremendous partner for the community. It has far exceeded our expectations in job creation. This has ultimately added to the tax base of the city. I'm impressed by as the mayor said, the spectrum of skill sets that the jobs will entail. And on balance, I have to look at this in terms of viability to our local economy and all of the knock-on effects that come from such an enormous investment. Yes, 52% will live here and 48% live outside of the county, but we are a regional job center. And this has been the case for a long time. It was the case when Thompson Consumer Electronics was here. And that's just, that's the reality of the situation. I'm very comfortable with that because people in surrounding communities need jobs as well. That can't always be supplied in the community. Challenges remain. I think housing is a major one, and we're all aware of that, supply and costs. And it's something we have to work on, and we need to redouble our efforts on. But I think this is a tremendous opportunity, and so I'll be supporting it, and I appreciate the ESD staff and Mr. Crowley for working through the details of this, and thank you to both to the representatives for coming this evening. Really appreciate your presentation, and good luck to you, and we'll see you back soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional final comment? Councilmember Smith.
I just want to say again that this is kind of a generational opportunity to revitalize parts of Bloomington with the investment by Catalent. So definitely I'm going to be supporting it, and I encourage everybody on the council to vote for its support as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for a final comment? Councilmember Scambolery.
Yes, thanks. Earlier tonight, someone mentioned Gary, Indiana, and the steel industry there. And anyone who's known me a while knows that I grew up there, and I watched the steel mills shut down one after the other or reduce their workforce. And I know what happened to that region. And I also know that particularly in mid-20th century, nobody could fathom something like that happening. Of course, we are fine, we are solid, we have the steel mills, they'll last forever. Areas can take unusual and unexpected turns. This company has consistently underpromised and over-delivered in what they have done. They are part of an industry that has a strong future, arguably one of the strongest along with IT and others. I believe they have been very supportive of a lot of community initiatives that are very important to us. And I'm pleased to see that they've brought this project forward. I am very pleased to offer my support for this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional final comments? Councilmember Sims.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Espejo and Mr. Eccles, thank you both for the presentation. You too, Mr. Crowley. Thank you for the presentation. But Mr. Crowley, you mentioned in one of your statements about Muncie. I don't know if you knew this, and some of my colleagues may, but that's my hometown. And it's a manufacturing town, much like Bloomington was back then. And we lost manufacturing. There were some other experiments that we did with downtown, with bollards and certain things. It just didn't work out from Muncie's standpoint. Now it could other places, but it just did not work out there. Now we've been here in Bloomington. We lost manufacturing jobs. Many of my friends at the time, many of them left town. Some, lost their property in some cases, or, so that was some of the things that we had to deal with. As we're listening to this presentation, and some of my colleagues have raised some very, very good questions. I won't mention names. Some have raised very good questions that I think we'll give more thought to. Some less so. But I will support this. Two comments that I do want to make to end this. There's been a comment that we would forego tax revenue by giving the abatement. And I know that's kind of close to it, but I don't think that's the true cost. And the way I think about it is, what are you losing if we don't make the investment? So I tend to think about it that way a little bit more. And I said there was two thoughts. Here's the last one. And Mr. Crowley, I'm gonna give you credit for this because it really hit home. We would rather have the challenge of dealing with growth instead of the problem of dealing with decline. I will support this, and thank you all for your presentation this evening.
Thank you. Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, thank you very much to our presenters from Catalent, Mr. Crowley, and the ESD staff and others. I guess I share a lot of the things my colleagues have already said, their viewpoints in some respects, and kind of jumping off of what Mr. Sims said near the end, Councilmember Sims, thinking of opportunity cost of this, and what happens also if we don't approve it is definitely like a consideration for me. I still have some discomfort because I feel like the connection hasn't been made clearly or strongly enough for me that this is necessary and justified as a condition in order for Catalent to invest. My hope would be that Bloomington and the landscape in Bloomington and Indiana is attractive enough on its own that we wouldn't have to abate taxes to attract growth. That's the real goal. That's the ideal. And so we're all sort of accepting implicitly that that's not the case, and that an abatement of a certain level is in fact a necessary condition for investment. And I understand we're competing with other jurisdictions, all that. But I just wish that I felt I was on more solid ground in terms of knowing what that landscape was. We're sort of operating in a fog, in a sense, and Mr. Crowley indicated this was a negotiation earlier, and he's right. We don't know. We're acting under uncertainty. It seems like even our presenters from Catalent tonight are acting under uncertainty with respect to their colleagues and managers at other sites. And I suppose that just is what it is. I just wanted to voice that that's a pretty high level of discomfort for me when granting an abatement at this level, not about how important is this expansion and growth and how much do we all want this to be in Bloomington. We all do. But again, the appropriateness of an abatement like this as a necessary condition. So I think I'm just gonna have to make these decisions without knowing everything I'd like to know, and that's is what it is. I'll vote yes on the resolution tonight, but do want to indicate that I still have some uncertainty overall, and we'll continue to think about this as we move towards the confirmatory resolution on the second. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional final comments? Councilmember Volin.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I share Mr. Flaherty's misgivings as well, but I think they go a little deeper than that. One of the things we've heard tonight is that the administration is asking us to, because we're afraid the legislature is going to get rid of the last remaining personal property tax on business anyway, that we should preemptively vote to eliminate the business personal property tax, which is an essential part of the way that municipalities calculate their budgets. The effect of that is going to transfer more of the burden to real property owners, to homeowners. And this council has demonstrated quite a strong affinity for the owners of single family homes. The thing that I think mystifies me the most is that we had a knockdown, drag out debate last year about the densification of Bloomington. And one of the things my colleague said was that single family homes are the apotheosis of American living. Everyone should be able to buy a home. But there were 130 new single family home starts in Monroe County in all of last year. There's no way we can build the kind of housing that we think that these new employees would expect to be able to buy in the city. But we already know that from Catalent's own numbers that only half of those employees are likely to locate in Bloomington. But we also know that Cook, for example, the company from whom Catalent bought its operation a few years ago, just in December announced that they were moving jobs to other places because we have a 3% unemployment rate. What it tells us is that if Catalent is successful, and we accept that they will be, they'll be importing people to live in Bloomington, and those people need to live somewhere. If my colleagues think the only places they would want to live are single family homes, what are we doing to get them built? Now, what I'm suggesting is that, of course, not everybody's going to want to live in a single family home. Not everyone necessarily needs to own, even though it's ideal if they could. But meanwhile, we know, I mean, if there's 550 parking spaces that are going to be built just to accommodate this expansion, it's reasonable to assume, and I should have asked before, that there's at least 3 times that many parking spaces now being used by current Catalent employees. That's a lot of land that's being used for this one function. And what I've suggested doesn't require that Catalent get into a new industry. They can do what the city did in order to get the Morton Street parking garage built, which is, the city doesn't own the land. They have a 100-year lease on it. Catalent has this land. If they could forego some of it for a short while to allow a developer to build housing on it, with the condition that that housing has to go to Catalent employees so as to reduce their carbon footprint. Let's say it's 200 units that they build. Catalent benefits in a number of ways. That's that many fewer people that have to drive. It reduces their carbon footprint for people who don't have to go to Greene County and back every day. It increases the number of people who they're hiring who will definitely be living in Bloomington. That's 200 more people who will be paying income taxes in Bloomington. And who knows what kind of deal Catalent can strike with a developer. I mean, they have the land and they have the demand. and they know there's a huge demand. It's a eminently reasonable request, as is parking cash out, a much simpler thing. If you know you have a limited amount of parking, charge a market price for it, what your employees are willing to pay for it, give them all a raise equal to that value, and then let those people who choose to find another way to get to work. They've got money in their pocket, and Catalent has to devote less land to parking. They're complicated ideas, but in the end, I mean, Catalent is a company that handles complicated things really well. They're in business to do things well. They don't even have to be in the rental or housing development business. There are plenty of companies in Bloomington who would, such as Harold Fish just mentioned, that would be delighted to work with Catalent to build housing, a little bit of housing on their property. That would be an innovative idea that would make this abatement worth voting for me, and it would benefit everyone, them, us, every taxpayer in the city of Bloomington. I would urge everyone to think about it. I don't think what I'm saying is unreasonable. I don't think it's a hard thing to do in the next 10 days. I know they have to run it up the flagpole, but I mean, this is by far the biggest tax abatement that we've ever considered. Okay, and it's the first time we're considering an abatement for twice as long as we've ever considered, for 20 years. So because the state allowed that. Well, if we're worried about the state taking it away, you know, I feel it's a little contradictory. But the bottom line is this is a big deal and it deserves big ideas. And I don't think what I'm asking for is something that can't be done in this short time. I urge everyone to think about it. I'm going to vote yes on the resolution tonight because I hope that it's an idea that will resonate with people. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional final comment from council? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, thank you to Mr. Crowley and Mr. Allen, and also the two leaders of Catalent who are here tonight. I appreciate you being here, and also appreciate the meetings that the BEDC organized ahead of time. I want to point out that there are costs to growth. So any community that grows through added residents, added jobs, there are naturally costs that the local government will incur due to that growth. You know, the wear and tear on streets, other infrastructure such as parks, schools, stormwater, et cetera. That all does add up with growth. So I don't want to lose sight of that. In general, I think that part of the reason that we are in such dire straits as far as climate change is that we recognized way too late that endless growth is unsustainable. That said, Catalent has been a good corporate community member since they arrived in Bloomington in 2017. I agree with my colleague who said they've underpromised and over-delivered. And I do appreciate that these are well-paying jobs. And I appreciate the connections that have been made with Ivy Tech and other entities to train people for a lot of these positions. The idea that Councilmember Volin proposed this evening is very appealing to me. I live very near to Catalent, and it is a vast expanse of asphalt. It is a lot of permeable surface that is in a prime location in Bloomington. It's just underutilized land, in my view, that is a prime location for housing. So if there's any way that we can continue discussions with Catalent, you know, perhaps independently of this abatement question, I would very much encourage the city to do that. to encourage Catalent, and since I have two Catalent leaders here, to encourage you to give serious consideration to the idea of allowing a housing developer to develop some housing on the large number of acres that you hold just west of the McDowell Gardens neighborhood. It's great that you have not had flooding issues so far, and I know we've had some big flood events this year that Catalent reportedly did not have any problems, but they're just going to get more frequent and they're going to get worse. And any additional green reclaiming of green space or reclaiming of permeable surface will help the community as a whole, and especially the residential neighbors near Catalent. So if housing is not going to be an option, consolidation of parking into some sort of structured parking and more reclamation of green space would also be excellent for the long-term well-being of the neighborhood. So with those items noted, I will be supporting the resolution tonight, and we'll try to learn a little more about the nitty-gritty of the financials between now and March 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more council member, Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone here tonight for the great discussion, and council members so far for going. I think I could piggyback off of everyone's comments tonight. You've covered a lot of what I have in my notes, so I'm going to try to leave that stuff out. So for me, I think what I didn't really say in the beginning is I think good paying jobs are really important. So I very much appreciate the idea of bringing at least 1,000 new jobs to Bloomington. You know, I think with the housing crisis, it is one side of it that people can't afford to live here, and also we don't have housing. So working even with 1,000 new folks to help them start saving for down payments, or even, you know, affording the rent in the city, that is exciting, even if we don't really have places for them to live. I didn't ask about unions, but I meant to. So I don't think Catalent is unionized, but I was just kind of wondering about that. We can get to it later. One thing I was struggling with kind of during this conversation is like, why am I hesitant about this? And can anything, is there anything here that can make me more excited? I understand I'm just one council member. Also pausing to say I plan to vote yes on this tonight. Sometimes some of our council members use the word trade-offs. There are always trade-offs. And I think this is a time where we don't necessarily have to have trade-offs. And when I think about trade-offs, one is the housing crisis, and that's very complicated. So kind of moving past that, I think about transportation. And I know many council members here have talked about this tonight too. But just like looking through our transportation plan, we have these goals, you know, shift our reliance on single occupancy vehicle from 62.8% to 60% by 2022. It's wild that year is here. But I think by adding 1,000 new jobs to a location where I can only imagine at least 90% of the employees are driving, I just wonder how we can work with Catalent, or Catalent can work with the city to really incentivize and make it easy for people to use other modes of transportation. And sometimes what we've done with PUDs in the past with developers who aren't getting tax abatements but are just getting a project approved is they, you know, pay for a bus line or increase bus frequency for maybe indefinitely. So and have, you know, covered bike parking on site, multi-use paths. I mean, you guys are in such a great location to get more and more folks getting there in other ways. I think it would be really great to capitalize on that the best we can. And I just see it as like a really awesome opportunity for both the city and Catalent to be an example in the region of this is what it looks like to expand and add new jobs. And this is how we're also addressing the climate crisis and also helping folks get to work in other ways so that they save money potentially by not owning so many cars. So I would love to look at that. I mean, one part in our transportation plan is to collaborate with employers to provide transit benefit programs. And I know those were talked about tonight mostly by Councilmember Volan, but I'm very interested in pursuing those types of things with Catalent, because I think they are, again, like the housing crisis is so complex and potentially, it just takes a lot of players to solve that. It's regional, but transportation here in Bloomington is, I think, something we can really work on together in small groups like this. So I am excited about the jobs, and I hope too that we can look at adding some transportation benefits and potentially transit options here to kind of like round this out. Thanks.
Thank you. I will take a turn last here, and only to say that quality of life and affordability in living in this community are certainly my passions in my service on this council. And we hear a lot about a housing crisis. And one of the things that I've spent a lot of time thinking about is we have a wage crisis that is actually contributing to people's inability to afford the kind of housing that we have in Bloomington currently. And so my yes vote on this is a vote in favor of increasing the floor of the wages in this community, because with higher wages and with Catalent bringing in 1,000 new jobs from the ones they've already created here that pay well, the more people in this community, in this region, in this county who have wages that can actually afford them the quality of life here in Bloomington, that's going to be a good thing for everybody. And so as we think about all the deficits that people are facing with respect to transportation costs, the cost of housing, the cost of food, the cost of childcare, all of these things that our people are struggling with here in Bloomington and Monroe County, it really, for me, comes down to we've got to raise the floor on wages. That means strong economic development, encouraging, incentivizing, doing whatever we can to keep the good corporate, small business, employment opportunities for the individuals who need and deserve an affordable quality of life here in Bloomington. So by all means, I'm going to be supporting this, along with just a call that, thinking back when Bloomington was a manufacturing community, we had Thompson, we had GE, we had Otis, we lost all those jobs. And slowly but surely, we're trying to develop new strategies for economic development and good employment that pay good wages through tech sectors, through the biotech sector, which Catalent, of course, represents. And so without saying anything more, I will again be very positive about this. And my thanks to Mr. Espejo and Mr. Eccles and everyone, and Mr. Crowley for being here with us tonight and answering our questions. There certainly may be more, but for tonight's vote, I will be voting yes. Anyone else wish to make an additional comment before we move to a roll call? And seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll on resolution 22-05?
Yes, Councilmember Rallo,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenberger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Bolin,
Yes.
Amber,
Yes.
and Sandberg.
Yes. And that passes unanimously, 900. Thank you all for the lively discussion. We have no matters for legislation for first reading, so we will now move to our second opportunity for public comment. This is for anything that has not already been addressed on our agenda this evening. And we welcome anyone from the public who wishes to make a comment. And Mr. Lucas, I will rely on you to help me see any raised hands.
Yes, if there are any members of the public that would like to comment at this opportunity, you can use the raise hand feature, which you can hopefully find in your control bar under either the reactions button or the more button. And if you're not able to locate the raise hand feature, please send a message via chat to the meeting host and we will recognize you that way. And I'm not seeing any hands shooting up at the moment.
I am not seeing any either. Wait just a minute or so. But seeing no rush to the podium, the virtual podium as it were, we will now move to our council schedule. And Mr. Lucas, is there anything we need to discuss?
Yes, first of all, the council had no legislation tonight for first reading, so there would not be any items for a committee meeting next week. So the council may want to consider a motion to cancel the Wednesday committee of the whole scheduled for next week.
So moved.
Second.
It's been so moved and seconded, I think, by both Mr. Volan and Mr. Rallo. So I can assume that that has been properly put on the floor. And will the clerk please call the question on canceling our committee of the whole next week?
Yes. Let's see, Councilmember Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Olin,
Yes.
Cambalori,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
and Rallo.
Yes.
All right, that passes unanimously. And I will say, it will be nice to have an additional Wednesday free because of the work that all of our interview committees teams are doing and will continue to do next week with respect to getting our boards and commissions fully staffed. So just a recommendation, and I'm sure all of you are hard at work. We still have a few more appointments to make. Anything else on the council schedule?
Just two reminders. There is a work session scheduled for this Friday, which would be an opportunity to hear about items coming forward to the council during the next legislative cycle starting on March the 2nd. That would include potentially the confirmatory resolution that was brought up tonight, as well as the annual CDBG funding recommendations that come to council in the form of a resolution. So unless I hear otherwise tonight, staff will plan on going forward with that work session this Friday. And also a reminder, next Thursday, the 24th at 6:30 p.m. is the annual State of the City address put on by the mayor. And I know he's been reaching out to council members about the details of how that will be conducted. But just wanted to remind you and the public that that State of the City address is scheduled for next Thursday, the 24th. And more information, I'm sure, will be available on the city's website. So that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Okay, very good. We don't need a show of hands as to how many council members are committed to coming to the work session on Friday. It's going to be held anyway.
I suppose it would be good to ask if members are interested in attending. I know there will see a couple of hands.
Who's coming? All right, we have a good number.
All right, we'll proceed with that. That's all I've got for you tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Lucas. And with that, we have concluded our business for this evening. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
And it's seconded. So thank you all for your time and attention. This meeting is adjourned. Good night.